Chapter 2952. Murong Jio's eyes trembled as he stared at the bloody light in the sky. Apart from shock, there was also deep fear in his eyes. He could not imagine that Nie Tian's sword could unleash such a terrifying power. After all, Nie Tian was only a half-saint at this moment. Murong Jio, it's your turn, Nie Tian said. His blood qi surged violently and his eyes were filled with killing intent. Brat, even if you take the Yuan explosion pill, you're only a 6th-rank half-saint. I'm not afraid of you. Murong Jio shouted in a deep voice. Is that so? Nie Tianling smiled coldly. His body shook and a violent aura soared into the sky. Murong Jio was shocked. Nie Tian's strength had increased again. He was a 7th-rank half-saint. How was this possible? Even if Nie Tian took the Yuan explosion pill, it was impossible for his strength to increase so much. Die, you piece of trash! Murong Jio did not understand what was going on. He roared and moved. A terrifying icy aura surged from his body. He could see that Nie Tian's aura was still increasing. He had to act quickly. If Nie Tian's strength continued to increase, it would become more and more disadvantageous for him. Hua! In the next moment, Murong Jio struck out with his palm. Icy aura surged from his body, and a huge icy palm appeared in the sky. It pressed down on Nie Tian. Triple saintly defiance, Earth's sword engulfs the moon. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he let out a low roar, and the sword intent within him surged to the extreme. Then, he swung his sword, and a sword shadow whistled through the air like a roaring dragon. Boom! When the palm and the sword collided, there was a terrifying explosion in the air. The surrounding space became stagnant. The wind and snow in the air turned into sharp blades under the impact of the violent force. They danced wildly in the air and left deep marks on the surrounding rocks. Bang! At this moment, the sword image was finally unable to hold on any longer. It shook violently in the air and instantly shattered. Bang! Then, with another muffled sound, Nie Tian's figure flew out and smashed heavily into the boulder behind him. Suddenly, blood and sword will burst out, and the surrounding snow melted. Humph, humph, humph! Murong Jio severely injured Nie Tian with a palm strike, and he immediately sneered and said arrogantly, You piece of trash, even if you consume the explosive Yuan pill, use forbidden arts, and ignite your vitality, so what? You are still not this young master's opponent. You're dead meat today. As he spoke, Murong Jio took a step forward, but in the next moment, his body froze on the spot. He saw Nie Tian, who was covered in blood, rising to his feet. Moreover, Nie Tian hadn't just stood up. His strength had actually risen once more to the 8th rank of the half-saint realm. Tui! Nie Tian abruptly stood up and spat out a mouthful of filthy blood. His eyes were Murong, and he glared at Murong Jio as he coldly said, Murong Jio, you're dreaming if you think you can kill me. Murong Jio's palm strike just now was indeed very powerful. Even though Nie Tian's strength was at the 7th rank of the half-saint realm, he still could not take it head-on. After all, Murong Jio was a 7th-rank demi-saint. More importantly, Murong Jio was a martial artist of the ice attribute, and his strength had improved tremendously in the Arctic snow mountain. QL11 still, Nie Tian's martial body was so powerful that he could still stand up even after being hit head-on by the giant palm. Moreover, the heavenly ice rheumatism and the blood yuan of the saint spirit were still supplying him with energy. That was why his strength had risen from the 5th rank to the 8th rank in a very short time. Could an 8th-rank demi-saint fight Murong Jio, a 7th-rank demi-saint? Brat, you've angered me. Murong Jio looked at Nie Tian. Sensing the disdain in Nie Tian's eyes, Murong Jio let out a wild roar. His aura surged, and an extremely cold aura spread in the air, as if to freeze everything. Make your move. Show me what you've got. Nie Tian was not afraid at all. He smiled cold and was extremely arrogant. You're courting death. Murong Jiu roared madly and raised his palm. An ice vortex that contained the terrifying power of ice appeared in his palm. Ice lotus bloom, kill. In the next moment, his lips curled into a cold smile as he murmured. Then, he moved his palm and thrust it out. Kaboom! Crack, crack, crack! The ice vortex whistled out and actually exploded in the air. A terrifying cold energy instantly spread out and an ice lotus that was like an ice mountain appeared. A terrifying cold energy was released, freezing the entire space. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed. He had to admit that he had underestimated Murong Jiu's strength. Go to hell. At that moment, Murong Jiu roared, and the ice lotus instantly expanded. Cold air filled the air, and everywhere it passed, the space was directly frozen. Astral soul wings appeared behind Nie Tian's back. Just as he was about to retreat, he found that the space around him was already filled with cold air, and his astral soul wings were directly frozen by the cold air. Crack, crack, crack! In the next moment, before he could even react, the space around him was directly frozen. He himself was also enveloped by a terrifying cold aura and was firmly trapped. Ha ha ha! Murong Jiu laughed wildly when he saw that Nie Tian was frozen by the ice lotus. He shouted, "Brat, you've been sealed by the ice lotus, and your meridians will soon collapse under the impact of the cold air. Do you think you can survive this time?" Nie Tian frowned. He forcibly burned his blood and qi, and at the same time, combined with the power of the stars, barely allowed him to move a little. However, the cold air in the surroundings mercilessly seeped over, and slowly seeped into his martial body. Instantly, he felt the flow of blood in his body slow down, and his meridians began to freeze. Even the 9 dragon veins had a faint layer of ice crystals. What a strong cold air! Nie Tian exclaimed in his heart, and his expression was very ugly. He didn't expect Murong Jiu's ice lotus to be so strong that it could actually freeze his yuan meridians. Brat, the taste of the frozen ice lotus doesn't feel good, right? Murong Jiu looked at Nie Tian viciously, and said in a cold tone, "This is the power of my Mu clan's bloodline. You should feel honored to die under this power." Ha ha! At the end of his words, Murong Jiu laughed wildly again. Is that so? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he sneered, and then the corners of his mouth formed a strange arc. Murong Jiu's eyes darkened, and his expression changed. Only then did he realize that Nie Tian had actually advanced to the 9th rank half-sage while he was sealed in ice. His eyes were filled with shock, and he couldn't understand what was happening in front of him. What did Nie Tian do? How could his strength keep increasing? The Yuan Burst Pill could only increase a martial artist's strength once, and it was definitely not the case with Nie Tian. Murong Jiu, since you want to play, I'll play with you. Nie Tian was sealed in ice, but he smiled coldly. He then raised his palm with difficulty, and an icy blue ball of light appeared on his palm. It was the heavenly ice rheumatism. Chapter 29:53. Celestial ice rheumatism appeared on Nie Tian's palm, scaring the fat cat so much that it yelped. How could the fat cat not see that Nie Tian was about to consume another celestial ice rheumatism? Nie Tian had just consumed a celestial ice rheumatism, and the clash of the two extremes of ice and fire had pushed his martial body to its limit. And now, if he swallowed another heavenly ice-flowing flame, how could his martial body withstand it? My ability is already at the level of a demi-saint, so why risk it again and ascend to the tier of demi-saint in one go? Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he coldly said, "After all, the blood yuan of a saint's soul is very rare." He could feel that the energy of the blood yuan of a saint's soul was still lingering in his body, and was far from being completely absorbed. If he did not absorb that energy now, it would be lost for nothing. Such a waste was not in line with Nie Tian's personality. Nie Tian, don't you dare! The fat cat was taken aback and cried out. But it was already too late. Nie Tian opened his mouth, and consumed another celestial ice rheumatism. This fellow is a lunatic, a complete lunatic. The Ghost Emperor stared blankly for a moment before crying out in shock. He had seen countless insolent people in his life, but none as fierce as Nie Tian. Nie Tian was basically gambling with his life if there was even the slightest chance. In truth, Nie Tian was gambling with his life because he could feel that the yuan meridians in his body were slowly freezing, and even if he had the ability of a demi-saint, he would not be able to break free of the glacial lotus's seal. Therefore, he could only consume another celestial ice rheumatism and borrow the momentum of the celestial ice rheumatism to break free of the glacial lotus's seal. What is that? Murong Jiu stared blankly for a moment when he noticed the celestial ice rheumatism in Nie Tian's hand. Although he did not know what the celestial ice rheumatism was, he could sense a very frightening presence from it. He guessed that the reason why Nie Tian's ability kept improving must be related to the celestial ice rheumatism. Arg! But at this time, when the heavenly ice-flowing flame entered his body, Nie Tian's body suddenly trembled. A terrifying power rushed out of his body like a primordial wild beast, as if it was going to tear his martial body apart. Crack, 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 crack. In that very instant, an explosion resounded from within Nie Tian's body. His frozen meridians, qi, and blood began to move once. How? Murong Jiu was Tian. Ice Tian translated editor Murong Tian. What on earth was that thing that Nie Tian had swallowed that could even neutralize his frigid aura? The heavenly ice rheumatism was an item of the two extremes of ice and fire. It contained the aura of both ice and fire at the same time. It was not surprising that it could break through the extreme cold qi. Boom! In the next moment, Nie Tian's body shuddered as a terrifying aura shot up into the sky, causing the frozen space around him to tremble. Crack, crack, crack! Immediately after, violent dragon qi gushed out of his body, and the surrounding frozen space cracked little by little. Trying to break my frozen ice lotus? Impossible! At this time, Murong Jiu let out a strange cry, and then an ice vortex appeared on his palm again. It left his hand and turned into a frozen ice lotus in the air, covering Nie Tian. Roar! But right at this moment, a deep dragon roar rang out from Nie Tian's body. It was majestic, and the might of a dragon could shake the world. Boom! Then, in the dragon qi ocean behind him, a giant dragon appeared. Its huge body tumbled, stirring up the heavens and the earth. Boom! Boom, boom, boom! In the very next instant, the surrounding frozen space began to crumble, and it soon spread to the giant frozen ice lotus. With a dull rumble of thunder, it directly exploded. Roar! The crimson dragon shot into the air and bellowed at the heavens, the power of thunder surging over its body in a majestic and awe-inspiring sight. Dragon qi could weaken space in the first place, and with Nie Tian's ability having skyrocketed to the threshold of demi-saint, the power that the crimson dragon could unleash was imaginable. Blarg! In the instant that the two frozen ice lotuses exploded, Murong Jiu's body shuddered, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other side, Nie Tian's figure shot into the air with a stomp and landed on the crimson dragon's head. Still, his current state appeared very frightening. His entire body was dripping with blood, and there were actually innumerable wounds all over his body as if he had been cut by thousands of sharp blades. At this moment, he had borrowed another surge from the heavenly ice rheumatism and the remaining power of the blood essence of the saint spirit to successfully ascend to first-level demi-saint. Even so, such a forceful breakthrough had caused great damage to his martial body, which had actually caused his body to break apart. If not for the 900 billion stars supporting his body, he would have been a pile of meat by now. Even if Nie Tian was suffering great pain at the moment, he was very happy and excited. Whatever the case may be, His ability was now first-level demi-saint. To him, it was a pleasant surprise, and he had to thank Murongjio, who stood before him, for that surprise. If not for Murongjio's insistence, Nie Tian would not have taken the risk of consuming a second heavenly ice rheumatism. You. Murongjio steadied his body, his face as white as a sheet, and left speechless in shock. He simply could not believe that Nie Tian had actually broken through his frozen ice lotuses and ascended to the threshold of demi-saint. He would never have believed it if he had not witnessed it with his own eyes. Who would have believed that a fifth-level demi-saint could ascend to first-level demi-saint in such a short time? Even those martial artists who had fused with powerful legacies would have to spend untold years to completely fuse with the power of legacies and improve their ability. Could Nie Tian be a monster? To think that he could ascend to demi-saint in the blink of an eye. Standing atop the dragon, Nie Tian's body shuddered as the bloodstains on his body were washed away, and the wounds on his body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Murongjio, didn't you want to kill me? He growled at Murongjio with a menacing gaze and cold eyes. I. Murongjio's eyes were trembling, his teeth chattering, and he could not even speak. At the moment, his frozen ice lotuses were broken and he was gravely injured, no longer having the strength to fight. Moreover, Nie Tian was already a first-level demi-saint, and Murongjio might not be a match for Nie Tian even if he was at his peak. TQR 1-inch. Nie Tianling sneered and took a step forward. The dragon beneath his feet vanished as he appeared right in front of Murongjio. What are you doing? Murongjio stared at Nie Tian and felt the murderous intent in the latter's eyes. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and his entire body was already drenched in sweat. I've killed so many martial artists of the Mu family. Do you think I'll let you live? Nie Tian said flatly as he approached Murongjio. I beg you, don't kill me. Murongjio's eyes trembled in fear, and his knees buckled as he knelt right away. He was still young and he did not want to die. Would you spare me if you were me? Nie Tianling laughed, and an austere sword will surged out of his body, instantly shrouding Murongjio. Chapter 2954. Secret. Nie Tian's eyes lit up when he heard Murongjio's words. He smiled and asked, What secret? I want you to promise that you won't kill me after I tell you, Murongjio said in a trembling voice as his eyes flickered when he saw that Nie Tian had stopped. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. He said cold, Young Master Mu, do you think you have the right to negotiate with me now? Murongjio was stunned. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be so overbearing. Speak. Nie Tian's face was as calm as water as he spat out one word cold. I'll speak. Murongjio looked at Nie Tian and finally nodded. He said, We found a holy chi whirlpool. Holy chi whirlpool? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't know what holy chi whirlpool was. Holy chi whirlpool. This is good stuff. At this moment, the fat cat's excited voice sounded. Fat, what is a holy chi whirlpool? Nie Tian frowned and asked in confusion. A holy chi whirlpool is a whirlpool of life energy emitted from a sacred world seed. Fat Cat smiled proudly. During the early stages of formation, the sacred world seed is very unstable. Occasionally, saint energy will gush out and dissipate into the outside world, forming a holy chi whirlpool. You can think of it as the holy aura vortex as a diluted sacred realm seed. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard what Fat Cat said. Excitement appeared on his face. The sacred world seed was a saint energy whirlpool, and a holy chi whirlpool was also a saint energy whirlpool. It was just that the saint energy inside was far less concentrated than the sacred world seed. Nie Tian, a holy chi whirlpool is definitely good stuff. The holy chi liquid you used before was mostly refined from a holy chi whirlpool, Fat Cat said excitedly to Nie Tian. All right, this divine whirlpool is mine. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his eyes filled with determination and greed. He had personally experienced the benefits of the Saint Chi liquid. If he could obtain a Saint Chi whirlpool and place it in the 9 superbs, wouldn't there be a large amount of Saint Chi liquid in the future? If you don't kill me, I'll take you to the holy aura whirlpool, Murong Jiu said as he looked at Nie Tian. Are you here to inform the Mu clan? Nie Tian looked at Murong Jiu and asked with a faint smile. Murong Jiu was stunned for a moment, then he nodded. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be so smart that he could even guess this. He and the dozen or so Mu family warriors had gone out to inform the Mu family. They originally thought that there wouldn't be any danger, so they didn't have any experts following them. Actually, if they didn't take the initiative to provoke Nie Tian, nothing would happen to them. However, after Murong Jiu saw Nie Tian, his murderous intent was aroused. That was his own fault. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, "Wait here first, I'll be back soon." As he spoke, he directly left and walked towards the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn. Coming to the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's side, Nie Tian sensed the latter's aura. It was considered stable. Fortunately, the battle just now didn't affect the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn, otherwise it would be troublesome. Tikyur 1 Nie Tian smiled faintly and walked to the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's side. He took out the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism and placed it by the Snow Unicorn's mouth. Roar! The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn roared, its 2 huge eyes shining brightly. Then, it opened its mouth and swallowed the dozen or so Heavenly Ice Rheumatism. Even Nie Tian dared to swallow the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism raw. The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn, which possessed both ice and fire attributes, naturally wasn't afraid of the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism's violence. After the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn consumed the Heavenly Ice Rheumatism, the 1,000-edged sword will in its body slowly dispersed, and the wounds on its body began to heal gradually. Roar, roar! At this moment, the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn roared and stared at Nie Tian with its bright eyes, looking pitiful. Nie Tian was speechless. This big guy actually knew how to act cute. It obviously wanted more Heavenly Ice Rheumatism. Nie Tian wasn't stingy. He took out another dozen or so Heavenly Ice Rheumatism and fed it to the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn. After a while, the wounds on the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's body had basically healed. However, its body was still a little weak, and it needed to rest for a while. Nie Tian looked at the big guy in front of him and couldn't help but murmur, "You're still a child, and you can already fight against an 8th-order pseudo-sage. How terrifying will your battle strength be when you mature?" Roar, roar! The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn roared twice, as if it understood Nie Tian's words. "All right, big guy." Nie Tian laughed and patted the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's head. He stroked the scarlet mane on its forehead and said, "I'm leaving. You can go back to the cave." Roar! Woo woo! The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn looked at Nie Tian and actually started to moan like a spoiled puppy. Its eyes were watery. Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. He patted the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn and got it to stand up. He naturally wanted to bring the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn away, but the space within the 9 extremities was too small. Moreover, the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn was an ancient beast, and it was better for it to live in the Arctic snow mountain. The Ice Flame Snow Unicorn's huge body stood up and walked towards the depths of the valley, turning back 3 times with every step as if it was reluctant to leave. Nie Tian watched as the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn entered the cave, and only then did he relax. "My lord, this is the Ice Flame Snow Unicorn. Why didn't you kill it and take its Ice Flame Snow crystals?" That was when Murong Jiu came up to Nie Tian and asked cautiously, "Let's go. Take me to the sacred aura vortex." Nie Tianling gave him a cold stare and said somberly instead of answering, "Yes." Murong Jiu quickly nodded, not daring to be disrespectful. Then, Murong Jiu led the way, and the two headed towards the depths of the Arctic snow mountain. Along the way, Nie Tian secretly examined his martial physique. His strength had risen to the first level of a demi-sage, and his martial physique had become even stronger. More importantly, his 9 extremities war god art had ascended to the 3rd level of the water extreme yuan heavenly realm, which was a great boost to his overall combat ability. However, with the improvement of his strength, the holy soul curse in his body had also risen from the 1st level to the 2nd level. The holy soul curse was an extremely powerful pressure on his martial physique, but such pressure was not a bad thing for his cultivation, and could actually speed up his cultivation. Moreover, the biggest improvement that his strength had brought was the awakening of the power of the 9,000 divine demons in his god-demon nascent embryo to 1,000. The power that 1,000 divine demons could burst out in an instant was simply unimaginable. By Nie Tian's estimation, his current combat ability was enough to take on a high-level demi-saint, and he might even challenge a demi-saint of the 8th or 9th level. "My lord, we're here." That was when Murong Jiu stopped and pointed at a valley in front of them. "The sacred aura vortex is in the valley ahead." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he used his divine sense to feel the extremely intense presence of holy power. Excited, he grabbed Murong Jiu and quickly walked to the entrance of the valley, where he saw a gaseous vortex floating in the air from afar. That intense presence of holy power was emanating from that vortex. Chapter 29:55. Holy Aura Whirlpool. Nie Tian gazed at the vortex in the air above the valley. Before he could say anything, the little fat cat and the ghost emperor's excited voices rang out in his divine sense. "Who is it?" But at this moment, a deep and powerful voice suddenly sounded in the valley, like a muffled explosion. Hearing this voice, Nie Tian could not help but narrow his eyes. Judging from the aura, this person was definitely a strong cultivator. "Fourth uncle, save me." Hearing this voice, Murong Jiu's eyes trembled with excitement and he shouted in surprise. Boom! Then, in the next moment, a violent and terrifying power whizzed out and blasted straight at Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned and reacted quickly. Wings of Star Soul appeared on his back and he retreated with Murong Jiu. The violent power roared like thunder and whizzed over his head. Luckily, he reacted in time. Otherwise, if he was hit by this power, he would have been injured. Nie Tian landed and looked outside the valley. A middle-aged man in gray appeared in front of him. His aura was violent and his eyes were fierce. "Fourth uncle." Murong Jiu saw the man in gray and shouted with burning eyes. This middle-aged man was none other than his fourth uncle, Mu Hengshan. However, when Mu Hengshan saw Murong Jiu, his face was dark and cold. "Murong Jiu, did you bring this kid here?" "Fourth uncle, save me. He forced me to do this," Murong Jiu shouted in panic. "Humph!" Mu Hengshan, however, laughed coldly and roared wildly. "Murong Jiu, you sure have guts to actually bring outsiders here. Do you know what this holy aura whirlpool means to our Mu family?" "Fourth uncle, I know I was wrong. Please save me," Murong Jiu shouted and was about to cry. "Save your strength and don't shout anymore," Nie Tian said coldly. "This fourth uncle of yours won't save you." Murong Jiu looked at Nie Tian and was stunned. His eyes were filled with fear. Nie Tian could tell just now that it was impossible for Mu Hengshan to save Murong Jiu. If Mu Hengshan had the heart to save them, he would not have directly acted just now. If it weren't for Nie Tian's quick reaction, he and Murong Jiu would have been in danger. One had to know that Mu Hengshan was a rank 1 pseudo-sage. One could imagine the power of his palm strike. From that palm, it could be seen that Mu Hengshan didn't want to save anyone. Humph humph. Mu Hengshan looked at Nie Tian, smiled cold and said, "Brat, you're pretty smart. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have come here. You're too naive. With your strength, do you really think you can covet the sacred Qi whirlpool?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but his face remained calm. He had indeed been a little careless. The Mu family would definitely have left behind experts to protect something like the sacred Qi vortex. His current strength had indeed increased tremendously, but it was still too much for him to take on this rank 1 pseudo-sage before him. Idiot! Go to hell! The next moment, Mu Hengshan suddenly growled and then struck out with his palm. A huge hand of ice appeared in the air, and like a mountain, it pressed down on Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. Wings of star soul appeared on his back, and he frantically retreated with Murong Jiu. Boom! Feeling the power of the hand of ice weaken slightly, the sword intent in Nie Tian's body surged, and he struck out with his sword. Boom! The next moment, the sword shadow bombarded the hand of ice, and with an explosion, the sword shadow collapsed. However, under the impact of the sword shadow, a crack appeared on the hand of ice. Nie Tian's figure moved, and he suddenly moved forward, passing through the crack. Seeing this scene, Mu Hengshan's eyes narrowed, and his expression was very surprised. He didn't expect Nie Tian's strength to be so strange. And Nie Tian's cleverness was also beyond his expectations. Stinking brat, you have some skills. The next moment, Mu Hengshan's eyes darkened and he sneered. The killing intent that surged out of his body became even stronger. It was hard for him to imagine that a first-level demi-saint could actually survive his hand of ice. My skills are not limited to this. Nie Tian smiled faintly, and the corner of his mouth raised into a strange curve. Fourth uncle, save me! But at this moment, Murong Jiu suddenly moved, and with a loud shout, he ran straight toward Mu Hengshan. The sudden turn of events caused Nie Tian's expression to flicker. He wanted to pull Murong Jiu back, but it was too late. Trash! Mu Hengshan saw Murong Jiu running over, and his face suddenly darkened, and then he struck out with his palm. Fourth. Boom! Murong Jiu's pupils shrank, and his small face was extremely shocked. But before he could shout out the last word, he was directly hit by the giant palm, and turned into a bloody light in the air. Even in death, he could never have imagined that his own fourth uncle would directly kill him. Your fourth uncle is really ruthless. Nie Tian saw the scene in front of him, and his eyes darkened slightly as he growled. TQR1 Mu Hengshan had just appeared, and he had displayed a strong killing intent. However, when Murong Jiu killed Murong Jiu, Nie Tian was also surprised. The two were uncle and nephew. Did Mu Hengshan not have any kinship in his heart? Mu Hengshan smiled cold and said, Does Murong Jiu not deserve to die for revealing the Mu family's secret? But he didn't die by my hands, he died by yours. Nie Tian's brows furrowed, and he immediately understood. This Mu Hengshan wanted to shift the blame onto him. Kid, it's your turn now. Mu Hengshan smiled coldly and said, But don't worry, I will leave your corpse intact. Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and there was actually cold contempt in his eyes. Are you so sure that you can kill me? You only have the strength of a level 1 demi-saint. In my eyes you are trash. Killing you is as easy as killing an ant for me. Mu Hengshan smiled coldly, and then the aura around his body surged. Waves of violent ice power roared in the air, cold and murderous. It seems that everyone in the Mu family is an ice attribute martial artist. Nie Tian faintly smiled as he felt Mu Hengshan's aura. Mu Hengshan's strength was stronger than Murong Jiu's, but his talent was far from the latter's. At least in terms of bloodline power, Murong Jiu was much stronger than Mu Hengshan. Mu Hengshan only had the strength of a level 1 demi-saint because he had lived for many years. Stinking brat, you still dare to be arrogant when you are about to die. You are courting death. Mu Hengshan felt the contempt in Nie Tian's eyes, and he couldn't help but become furious. His figure moved in a flash, and the cold aura around his body soared to the extreme. Humph! The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched, and a strange smile appeared on his face. He murmured, The one who is courting death is you. As his voice fell, the demonic and divine power in his body instantly surged, flowed through his body, and gathered toward the demon eye. Nie Tian hadn't used the demon eye for a long time, and the power of his eyes was already full. Chapter 29:56. Nie Tian looked at Mu Hengshan, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile. He was about to use the demonic eye. Fat Cat had mentioned that the power of the demonic eye was closely related to the divine and demonic energy awakened in Nie Tian's body. To put it simply, the more divine and demonic energy awakened, the more powerful the demonic eye would be. The power of the demonic eye was triggered by the divine and demonic energy. Die, you bastard! Mu Hengshan looked at Nie Tian and vaguely sensed something, but he did not take it to heart. Instead, he let out a low roar and violently thrust his palm at Nie Tian. He did not believe that a first-level demi-saint trash could cause any waves in front of him. Boom! Mu Hengshan's palm was powerful and vast, and the endless cold air around him rolled out like raging waves. It instantly condensed into an enormous icicle in the air, and came crashing down. TQR 1-inch crack, crack, crack. Wherever the enormous icicle passed, the space was frozen, and the snowflakes that filled the sky were turned into ice crystals. Nie Tian immediately felt the powerful pressure and the bone-chilling coldness coming at him, which caused his gaze to freeze. However, there was not a hint of fear on his face. Instead, his smile became even more sinister. "You're dead, you little bastard!" Mu Hengshan roared as he stared at Nie Tian with his venomous eyes in midair, as if he could already see the scene of Nie Tian being smashed into pieces by the icicle. Boom! It was at this moment that Nie Tian's right eye suddenly trembled. Then, an enormous power of the eye surged out, causing the air to tremble slightly. Whoosh! In the next instant, a cold black radiance shot out from Nie Tian's right eye. Like an arrow released from a bow, it was swift and fierce to the extreme. The moment the black radiance pierced through the air, an incomparably dark aura spread and filled the space within tens of thousands of meters. The entire world suddenly darkened, as if night had descended. Mu Hengshan suddenly felt a killing intent that seeped into his bones. His expression could not help but change, and his entire person actually became sluggish for a moment. Bang! Crack, crack, crack! At this moment, the murderous black light descended from the sky and bombarded the huge ice all. It directly penetrated the ice all, and the sound of cracking could be heard in the air. The 10,000-meter-long icicle suddenly exploded and shattered in the void, turning into cold air and dissipating. And at this moment, Mu Hengshan's pupils fiercely shrank as the fear in his heart was perfectly written on his face. At this moment, he felt a sharp killing intent, and the aura of death was approaching. Pooh! In the next instant, a cold and severe black light tore through the air and attacked. It swiftly passed by at an inconceivable speed and directly pierced through Mu Hengshan's chest. Pooh! Mu Hengshan's body fiercely trembled as he violently spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he lost control of his body and directly fell down. He heavily smashed onto the icy ground and died on the spot. At this moment, at the entrance of the valley, a dozen or so Mu family martial artists saw this scene and uniformly froze, their hearts shocked to the extreme. A first-level demi-saint instantly killed a first-level demi-saint. If they had not seen such a scene with their own eyes, who would have believed it? Nie Tian's figure descended and stared coldly at Mu Hengshan's corpse, a cold smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. To be honest, even he himself did not expect the power of the demon eye to be so terrifying. His original plan was to use the demon eye to heavily injure Mu Hengshan, and then he could fight Mu Hengshan head-on. But what surprised him was that the demon eye actually killed Mu Hengshan in an instant. But at this moment, a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his right eye, which was caused by overexhaustion of his eye power. He had underestimated the power of the demon eye, which was why he used all his eye power. If he had known that the demon eye was so terrifying, he definitely would not have used so much eye power. Now that the demon eye's eye power was completely exhausted, it would probably take half a month to replenish it. It was also the greatest weakness of the demon eye. Every time he used it, he would have to wait another half a month before he could use it again. Nie Tion's ability had improved too quickly, and he had suddenly awakened 1,000 strands of demonic and divine energy. It was only normal for him to misjudge the power of the demon eye. That was when Nie Tion abruptly looked up, his chilling gaze locking onto the dozen or so Mu family martial artists. Run! It was only then that the Mu family martial artists finally reacted, and promptly cried out as they scattered in all directions. Nie Tion could not help but narrow his eyes at the sight. The Mu family martial artists all had the strength of demi-saints and were no match for Nie Tion, but their scattering left Nie Tion in a difficult position. He could not kill everyone at once. Forget it. Let's go take a look at the sacred chi vortex. Nie Tion smiled bitterly and gave up. He naturally knew that the sacred chi vortex in the valley before him was the most important thing. With a flash, Nie Tion directly entered the valley. Such a concentrated presence of sacred power. Sensing the sacred chi vortex at such a close distance, Nie Tion's eyes could not help but tremble as he exclaimed inwardly. The sacred chi vortex before him was 500 meters wide, and it floated in the air like a behemoth that was continuously absorbing the divine energy around it. Nie Tion could clearly sense that the presence of divine energy in the entire valley was very thin. Even so, the presence of sacred power in the valley was extremely concentrated. The sacred chi vortex originates from the sacred world seed, inheriting its attribute of absorbing divine energy around the world. Within the sacred chi vortex, there is a core of sacred power condensed from sacred power, which could incessantly convert the absorbed divine energy into sacred power. The fat cat's voice rang as it explained. If that's the case, then the sacred chi vortex is a super powerful formation that produces sacred power. Nie Tion's eyes trembled, and he could not help but gulp. If I could get my hands on the sacred chi vortex, wouldn't I have an endless supply of sacred power? Nie Tion, you think too easily. The fat cat laughed. Even if there is a core of sacred power within the sacred chi vortex, the rate at which it is converted into sacred power is very slow. According to my observation, the amount of sacred power that this sacred chi vortex can convert in a day is at most equivalent to 1 drop of sacred chi liquid. 1 drop of sacred chi liquid. Nie Tion could not help but exclaim in delight as his eyes heated up at the fat cat's words. He knew firsthand how useful the sacred chi liquid was. If the sacred chi vortex in front of him could produce 1 drop of sacred chi liquid every day, it would already be very good for him. Nie Tion, the sacred power that is converted from the core of sacred power will fill the sacred chi vortex in the form of sacred chi. Even a half-saint god pill master would need several months to extract a drop of sacred chi liquid from the sacred chi vortex, the fat cat sighed. This. Hearing the fat cat's words, Nie Tion's face froze, and he could no longer smile. He was being too idealistic. It turned out that the power of the sacred chi vortex still needed to be extracted before it could be converted into sacred chi liquid. If I get my hands on the sacred chi vortex, wouldn't I have to bring a god pill master with me at all times? After a while, Nie Tion became cold and asked with a frown. Yes, the fat cat nodded. It would not waste time to extract the sacred chi liquid for Nie Tion. Chapter 29:57. When Nie Tion heard Liolio's words, he couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. He didn't quite understand what Lulu said. That's right. At the same time, little fat cat let out a strange cry, as if it had suddenly realized something, and said in surprise, "Why didn't I think of that? That's not a bad idea. The blood seal of the Holy Spirit can indeed be merged with the core of holy power." Ghost Emperor's voice rang out, unable to hide his surprise. Nie Tion, on the other hand, was dumbfounded. He still didn't understand. Nie Tion, the blood seal of the Holy Spirit can absorb all kinds of energy, then refine it and store it in the blood seal for you to absorb. Fat Cat began to explain, and the core of holy power can absorb the divine energy of heaven and earth and convert it into holy power. Think about it, what would happen if the blood seal of the Holy Spirit and the core of holy power were merged together? Nietion's expression changed when he heard Fat Cat's words. He was extremely happy. The blood seal of the Holy Spirit could absorb all kinds of energy, and the core of holy power could convert divine energy into holy power. If the blood seal of the Holy Spirit and the core of holy power were merged, wouldn't the blood seal of the Holy Spirit be able to convert the absorbed energy into holy power? Moreover, this holy power could be directly absorbed by Nietion, just like the holy Qi liquid. After understanding all this, Nietion's eyes instantly lit up. He stared at the holy Qi whirlpool in front of him with uncontrollable greed. Even a powerful force like the Mu family valued the holy Qi whirlpool so much, let alone Nietion. All right, I'll transfer the holy Qi whirlpool to the 9 superbs now. Nietion's lips curled into a smile and he stepped forward, ready to make his move. Wait! However, at this moment little Fat Cat suddenly cried out in shock. Nietion's body froze and he instantly retreated. At the moment when Fat Cat screamed, Nietion felt a hidden murderous intent surging in the air. After he retreated, the murderous intent actually disappeared miraculously. What's going on? Nietion frowned and asked in surprise. He had clearly sensed the entire valley just now and did not sense any strange aura, but why did he feel a terrifying killing intent when he approached the whirlpool of holy aura? It's the Saint Energy Sealing Array. The Fat Cat said with a gloomy expression, after the sacred world seed is born, it will automatically protect itself. It will condense a protective formation in the surroundings, which is commonly known as the sacred energy formation. Just like some mysterious objects of the heavens and earth, they are protected by a formation or a divine beast, right? Nietion's eyes narrowed as he asked. Yes. The Fat Cat nodded and continued, the holy aura whirlpool is emitted from the holy world seed, so it also carries a holy power restrictive formation. With your perception, it's impossible for you to detect the existence of the Saint Energy Forbidden formation. If you had taken another step forward, you would have become a corpse. Nietion's face stiffened, and he gulped down a mouthful of saliva with lingering fear in his heart. He was too rash. If the holy aura whirlpool was not protected, the people from the Mu clan would have taken it away. Why would they stay here and watch over it? Fat Ghost Emperor, do you have a way to break the Saint Energy Forbidden formation? Nietion's face darkened as he asked in a low voice. From what the Fat Cat said, the Saint Energy Forbidden formation was extremely terrifying, and they could only rely on him and Ghost Emperor. I do have a way, but with your strength, you may not be able to break the Saint Energy Forbidden formation. The Fat Cat's face darkened as she said, moreover, it will take some time to break the Saint Energy Forbidden formation. The people from the Mu clan have already escaped, and they should be here soon. That's a little troublesome. Nietion frowned and his face darkened. With his strength, it would be difficult for him to break the Saint Energy Forbidden formation alone. Nietion, looks like you'll have to ask Shui to come out for a while. The Fat Cat said in a low voice. Sure. Nietion's eyes trembled, and he was a little hesitant. It was true that Shui was very strong, but Hua Iru had warned him not to let Shui reveal herself. Therefore, even when they were facing Murong Jiu and Mu Hengshan, Nietion had never thought of letting Cher take action. Nietion, this is the Arctic Snow Mountain, there won't be anyone else here. The Fat Cat knew what Nietion was thinking and said in a low voice. All right. Nietion thought for a while and finally nodded. After all, the holy aura whirlpool was too tempting. He would not be willing to give it up just like that. Then, Nietion asked Cher to come out from the 9 superbs. The Fat Cat's figure appeared immediately, and it explained the situation to Cher. In the end, it said, Little girl, the Saint Energy Forbidden formation is very dangerous. Without my order, you must not take action, understand? Understood. Cher nodded, and her clear and bright eyes looked at Nyetian. She was very happy to be able to help Nyetian. All right, get ready, we will start immediately. The fat cat smiled faintly, and then its figure moved, and it came to mid-air, and its fat body began to release glazed chi continuously. Streams of glazed chi flowed in the void, and slowly outlined the lines of the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. TQR1 Nyetian and Shui couldn't help but marvel at this scene. The fat cat was indeed powerful, to be able to deconstruct the structure of the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation so clearly. Done. After a while, the fat cat let out a deep breath. It had successfully constructed the entire Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. After all, the Holy Aura Whirlpool was not a sacred world seed, so the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation outside it was relatively simple. Following this, the fat cat continued to release glazed chi, and soon, a small godly formation was constructed. Little Shui, stand inside the godly formation, and attack the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation according to my instructions. The fat cat looked at Cher and nodded. Shui smiled faintly, then stepped into the crystal formation. Nyetian's eyes flickered. He was curious to see what the fat cat was going to do next. Nyetian, go outside the valley now. Remember, do not let anyone near the valley. However, at this moment, the fat cat said to Nyetian. Nyetian was stunned for a moment, and then smiled and walked out of the valley. Seeing that Nyetian had left the valley, the fat cat was slightly relieved, and then looked at Cher and said, Little girl, follow my instructions, do not make any mistakes. Cher nodded, and her eyes were filled with confidence. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Then, the fat cat raised both of its paws, and continuously slapped the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. However, its intention was not to attack the Forbidden Formation, but to control Cher's attacks. Cher's eyes focused, and a blood-red long sword appeared in her hand. It was her bloodline sword, God-slaying. She raised her arm, and although it was an ordinary movement, it exuded a terrifying aura. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, the God-slaying sword attacked, and the crimson sword rays followed the traces of glazed chi, bombarding the Saint Energy Forbidden Formation. This was the first time Cher used the God-slaying sword after merging with the Heavenly Sacred Heart, and she used it on a forbidden formation. Chapter 29:58. Standing outside the valley, Nyetian could hear the rumbling coming from the valley from afar. He did not dare to be careless and stood guard outside the valley. Then, the rumbling in the valley became louder and louder. Ripples of formation power spread out and surged in the space. Such powerful ripples of formation power. I really can't fight against such power, Nyetian said to himself as he felt the ripples of formation power. Even though he was a first-stage demi-saint, he was still weaker than Cher. If it were not for Cher, he would not have been able to do anything to the sacred chi vortex. After a long time, the rumbling in the valley did not weaken. Instead, it was getting louder and louder. The sacred force sealing formation is really powerful. It's so hard to break it. Nyetian frowned and murmured. At the same time, in the valley, boom, boom, boom. Streaks of crimson sword aura whizzed out and bombarded the sacred force sealing formation. The sword aura flickered in the air, and the formation patterns flowed. At that moment, beads of sweat were dripping from Cher's forehead. Even though she had the meridians of 3 lives and the Wan Jian bloodline, she would not be able to hold on much longer under the constant consumption of sword will and power. Little lass, hang in there. The seal is about to break. Little fat cat looked at Schwerer, its cat face filled with anxiety. If Cher's power ran out and she could not continue attacking, then the sacred force sealing formation would quickly recover, and all the previous attacks would be in vain. That was why Cher had to hold on. Yeah. Cher nodded heavily. There was a faint blush on her delicate face. She was obviously very nervous. Boom. At that moment, a violent sound was heard from outside the valley. It sounded like a thunderclap. Oh no! Fat Cat's heart sank and she could not hide the panic on her face. It was obvious that someone had arrived outside the valley and had clashed with Nyetian. Now, she could only hope that the intruder was not too strong and that Nyetian could handle it. Outside the valley, more than 10 figures appeared. Each of them was filled with killing intent as they stared at Nyetian. The leader was a gray-robed old man. He looked at Nyetian with a gloomy expression and said in a cold voice, "Kid, get out of the way." "Impossible." Nyetian looked at the gray-robed old man and said coldly. As soon as they arrived outside the valley, they attacked Nyetian. It was fortunate that they were not all that powerful. Most of them were low-level demi-saints, with only a few being at the 6th level. As for the gray-clothed old man in the lead, he was only a first-rank half-saint. "Kid, do you think this master doesn't know what's in this valley?" The gray-robed old man looked cold at Nyetian and said in a deep voice, "There's a Saint Chi whirlpool here, right?" Nyetian frowned and his expression changed. "This master is a half-saint divine array master. I would never be wrong about the ripples of a sacred barrier." The gray-robed old man smiled cold and said, "Kid, if you get out of the way now, I might even reward you with a drop of Saint Chi liquid if I'm in a good mood. If you don't get out of the way, don't blame me for being ruthless." Nye Tianling smiled coldly, his gaze as firm as steel as he said in a deep voice, "As long as I'm here, no one should even think about taking half a step into the valley." The fact that the gray-robed old man was a half-saint divine array master was something that Nye Tian did not expect. Array masters were rare, and those who could reach the level of half-saint were even rarer. Nye Tian had met a half-saint divine array master, Mu Shuijing, back in the frozen ruins. That fellow was known as the best divine array master in the frozen ruins, but Mu Shuijing lost a bet and became Nye Tian's disciple by accident. Moreover, Nye Tian had even given Mu Shuijing the blueprint of the formation of the Ghost Emperor's tomb. And now, another half-saint divine array master had appeared in front of him. It appeared that the gray-robed old man was not a nobody in the sacred spirit domain. Even so, Nye Tian did not care about the gray-robed old man's identity. Anyone who dared to approach the valley would be killed without mercy. "You talk big, kid." The gray-robed old man smiled cold, but his gaze soon trembled and revealed a blazing heat. He could already sense that the ripples of the formation within the valley were becoming more and more powerful, as if the sacred barrier was about to be broken. He guessed that the one breaking the formation within the valley must be a master of array, and above that would be a half-saint, or perhaps even a demi-saint. Even in the entire sacred spirit domain, there were only a handful of demi-saint array masters. The reason he did not attack Nye Tian until now was because he was worried that the master of array in the valley was of such high status that he could not afford to offend him. "You can try," Nye Tianling replied coldly, his eyes overflowing with killing intent. One of the martial artists behind the gray-robed old man took a step forward and stared at Nye Tian cold as he said, "Elder Yu, there's no need to waste your breath on this kid. Let us kill him right away." The gray-robed old man was named Yu Hongnian, an inner elder of the Yu family, and held a very high position in the family. He had entered the Arctic snow mountain ahead of time, not only to observe the terrain of the entire mountain, but also to search for the sacred Qi whirlpool. After all, the sacred world seed of the Arctic snow mountain was recently discovered, and there would definitely be many sacred Qi whirlpools within the entire mountain. Still, he was very unlucky as he did not find any sacred Qi whirlpools. He had been with the main group of the Yu family, but when he suddenly sensed the ripples of the sacred barrier, he hurried over with a few martial artists of the Yu family. That was how the scene unfolding before his eyes happened. Yu Hongnian looked at Nye Tian, but he waved his hand to stop the martial artist of the Yu family. He was a half-step divine array master, and he knew very well how difficult it was to break the sacred barrier, so he was certain that there must be an array master in the valley, and that person's attainment in array formations was definitely not below his. A person with such attainment in array formations must have a very high status. TQR1 therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, he was not willing to offend the person inside. However, the sacred barrier was about to be broken, and he was absolutely unwilling to leave at this time. Senior inside, Junior Yu Hongnian took the liberty to come here and take a look at the sacred Qi whirlpool. I hope Senior can make things convenient for us and let us in. After thinking for a moment, Yu Hongnian shouted towards the valley. He did not dare to force his way in, so he wanted to be polite before resorting to force. However, after his voice fell, there was no response from the valley, and only ripples of array power spread out, as if mocking Yu Hongnian. Yu Hongnian waited for a long time and did not get a response. He frowned and shouted again. However, the result was the same, there was still no response. Don't shout, the master in the valley will not respond to you, Nie Tian said with a faint smile. Of course, he could see that Yu Hongnian was afraid of something, so he spoke according to the latter's thoughts. Senior, if that's the case, then don't blame Junior for being rude. Yu Hongnian's old face became gloomy, and he shouted. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he spat out 2 words coldly. Do it! Chapter 29:59. Understood. The dozen martial artists behind Yu Hongnian responded in unison, their voices booming like thunder. Then, a dozen pairs of eyes glared at Nie Tian as ferocious as wolves. It was then that Yu Hongnian's eyes narrowed and he suddenly said, Don't hurt him. Just make him back off. Although he was forced to act, he was still fearful of offending a master of arrays, which was why he did not dare to let the martial artist of the Yu family hurt Nie Tian. The martial artist of the Yu family was taken aback, but he still nodded helplessly, not daring to disobey Yu Hongnian's order. In their eyes, a first-level demi-saint like Nie Tian was not worth mentioning, and any one of them could easily crush Nie Tian. Brat, if you know what's good for you, get lost. One of the martial artists of the Yu family stepped out and roared coldly with a wild aura. You're the one who should get lost. Nie Tianling laughed. His body trembled, and a sword aura shot into the sky, turning into a violent blast in the air, the rolling aura causing the space to tremble. Bang! In the next moment, a muffled sound resounded. The Yu family martial artist didn't even have the time to react before he was blasted flying by the sword force. He drew an arc in the air and smashed heavily onto the icy ground. Huh! The sudden turn of events caused the expressions of Yu Hongnian and the others to change at once, the shock in their hearts written all over their faces. How could they have imagined that Nie Tian could heavily injure a second-level demi-saint with just his sword aura? How is that possible? Yu Hongnian could not help but exclaim when he came to his senses. He was very doubtful that the silver-haired martial artist standing before him was really a first-level demi-saint. Elder Yu, I didn't ask them not to hurt me just now. Those words saved your lives. Nie Tian looked at Yu Hongnian and smiled faintly. His expression was calm, but it gave off the impression of incomparable insolence and dominance. Indeed, if Yu Hongnian had not said those words, Nie Tian would not have shown mercy to the Yu family. His ability was enough to crush all the martial artists of the Yu family before him. Arrogant! At this moment, one of the Yu family cultivators was enraged. With a loud roar, his figure flashed, and he directly sent out a palm strike. A vigorous palm force blasted towards Nie Tian. You overestimate yourself! Seeing this, Nie Tian let out a low shout and the starlight heaven chop appeared in his hand. With a sweep of his sword images whizzed out and directly shattered the palm images in the air. Bang! Immediately after, there was another muffled sound, and that Yu family cultivator flew backwards. After landing heavily on the ground, he spat out a mouthful of blood and could no longer get up. Although Nie Tian's sword didn't take his life, it directly crippled his Yuan meridians. The reason why he attacked so fiercely was to give the Yu family martial artists enough shock. This. Yu Hongnian was taken aback at first, but he quickly reacted. Looking at that cultivator, his face instantly stiffened and his heart sank to the bottom. That martial artist was a level 6 demi-saint, and yet his Yuan meridians were so easily crippled by Nie Tian's sword. It was simply inconceivable. How could Yu Hongnian not see that Nie Tian did not use his full strength? Otherwise, those two Yu family martial artists would not have survived. At this moment, the other Yu family martial artists were looking at Nie Tian. Their faces no longer had the ferocity and insolence from before. Instead, it was replaced by deep fear and dread. Nie Tian was simply too powerful, so powerful that they could not understand it. Elder Yu, can you leave now? Nie Tian withdrew his sword aura and asked Yu Hongnian with a faint smile. Yu Hongnian's old face was stiff and ugly, and it took him a long time to react. Unwilling to accept this, he looked at Nie Tian and said, "Young man, this old man would like to wait here and meet the array master in the valley. Is that all right?" "Meet?" Nie Tianling smiled coldly and said, "I'm afraid you won't be able to leave alive after meeting her. There was no array master in the valley, only Cher and Fat Cat. If Yu Hongnian were to meet Cher, Nie Tian would not let him leave alive." Yu Hongnian was a demi-saint array master, and his senses were far beyond the average person's. It was very possible that he could see through Cher's identity. Well, Yu Hongnian's face stiffened and became extremely ugly. He believed that Nie Tian was afraid that the array master's identity would be exposed. Wouldn't the Yu family know who had the sacred Qi vortex then? "Elder Yu, if you don't leave now, don't blame me for being impolite." Nie Tian didn't want to waste any more words with Yu Hongnian. He sneered, his eyes surging with chilly killing intent. Yu Hongnian's eyes trembled, and panic appeared on his face. He quickly nodded and said, "Young man, thank you for your mercy just now. Yu Hongnian of the Yu family will remember this." After saying that, he did not stay any longer and left with the Yu family warriors. "Remember?" Nie Tian looked at Yu Hongnian's back and said with a faint smile, "Yu Hongnian, do you remember my kindness or do you remember me as a person?" Seeing Yu Hongnian's figure disappear completely, Nie Tian heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there were no experts around Yu Hongnian, otherwise it would be troublesome. TQR1 however, Nie Tian speculated that Yu Hongnian's status should not be low, otherwise it would be impossible for him to enter the Arctic snow mountain in advance. At this time, Nie Tian felt that the array power in the space was extremely violent and had reached its peak. Could it be that the sacred power forbidden array has not been broken yet? Nie Tian asked doubtfully, worried that Fat Cat and Cher might have encountered an accident. His figure moved and he walked towards the valley. In the valley, Fat Cat was extremely nervous. The array pattern of the sacred power forbidden array had been completely destroyed, and the forbidden array eye was successfully exposed. But at this time, Cher was almost out of energy. Her little face was as pale as paper, and she was approaching the limit of her martial body. "Little Shui, destroy the array eye with the last strike." Fat Cat looked at Cher and said in a low voice, "Yes." Cher nodded, and her beautiful eyes surged with incomparable determination. In the next moment, her body shook, and streams of blood qi shot out from her body. Her energy was exhausted, and she spontaneously ignited her blood qi. Cher. Nie Tian saw this scene from afar, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart. Boom! At this time, Cher stabbed out with her godforsaken stab, and a blood-colored sword shadow appeared. The aura was not strong, but it contained great power. In an instant, it bloomed and bombarded the forbidden array eye. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and directly bombarded the array eye. After a loud bang, the sacred power forbidden array collapsed. At this time, Cher's body went limp, and she could no longer support herself. "Cher, are you okay?" Nie Tian saw that, and he flew over, and coincidentally caught Cher in his arms, and shouted anxiously, "Nia Tian, I helped you break the forbidden array." Cher's little face was as white as a sheet, but there was a happy smile on her face. Her beautiful eyes looked at Nia Tian seriously and said, "Yes, yes." Nia Tian nodded, and then released the energy of the earth vein source to help Cher recover. After a while, Cher's complexion improved a little, and Nia Tian asked her to return to the 9 superbs. "Nia Tian, little Shui is fine. She just used up too much energy. She will be fine after a few days of rest." Fat Cat looked at Nia Tian, took a deep breath and said, "But her energy was not wasted. The sacred power forbidden array has been broken." Chapter 2960. Nia Tian looked at the sacred Qi whirlpool and smiled. Cher's efforts were not in vain after all. She had successfully broken the sacred force sealing array. "Nia Tian, transfer the sacred Qi whirlpool to the 9 extremities," Fat Cat said with a smug smile. Liolio's fusion with the sacred force core was obviously not something that could be done in an instant, so Nia Tian had to transfer the sacred Qi whirlpool to the 9 extremities first. "All right." Nia Tian nodded firmly and was ready to move. However, it was at that moment that a deep and powerful voice resounded in the void. "Young man, you shouldn't have taken something like the sacred Qi whirlpool." As the voice echoed out, a cyan-robed figure appeared in the air above the mountain valley. He looked at Nia Tian with his beady eyes and a smile on his face. "Huh!" Nia Tian frowned as he looked at the newcomer in the air. It was a skinny old man who was not very strong and was merely a demi-saint. However, his aura was a little strange, as if he had fused with the void where he was. "Nia Tian, that's a pseudo-saint god alchemist." Fat Cat's voice rang out at that moment, reminding Nia Tian. A pseudo-saint god array master. Nia Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he was quite surprised. Yu Hongyan was a demi-saint god array master just now, and he did not expect another pseudo-saint god alchemist to show up now. In fact, it was not all that surprising. After all, the commotion when the sacred force sealing array was broken was too great, and these powerful god array masters and god alchemists would naturally be able to sense it. Nia Tian did not expect this unassuming old man to be a pseudo-saint god alchemist. "Young man, I advise you to put down the sacred Qi whirlpool." The green-robed old man smiled wretchedly and moved, landing directly in the valley. He stared at Nia Tian and said, "Of course, I won't let you suffer a loss. I'll give you a drop of Saint Qi liquid, how about it?" "A drop of Saint Qi liquid?" Nia Tian looked at the green-robed old man and could not help but laugh. This old fellow was deceiving him like he was a 3-year-old child. He wanted to trade a drop of holy Qi for a holy Qi whirlpool. This old thing really knew how to do business. "Young man, the sacred Qi liquid is a good thing. It can help you increase your strength rapidly." The green-robed elder laughed, seemingly worried that Nia Tian didn't know the value of the sacred Qi liquid. "Old man, I know what holy Qi liquid is," Nia Tian said with a smile, raising his eyebrows. "Then what do you think? Do you want to trade or not?" The green-robed old man did not get angry. Instead, he chuckled and asked with a burning gaze. "Change." Nia Tian laughed and said, "As long as you give me 1,000 drops of Saint Qi liquid, I will give you this Saint Qi whirlpool." The green-robed old man was taken aback. His face darkened and he screamed, "Brat, are you playing with me?" "I'm playing with you." Nia Tian's face darkened as well. He said in a cold tone, "You're clearly playing with me." "You." The green-robed old man's face darkened. He suddenly took a step forward and slapped Nia Tian with his palm. Suddenly, a gust of green Qi appeared and enveloped Nia Tian. Eyebrows furrowed, Nia Tian activated his star soul shield to ward off the green aura. In the next moment, he took a step forward and stretched out his hand. Like a pair of iron pincers, he tightly grasped the green-robed old man's throat. He growled in a low voice, "Treacherous villain, how dare you use poison? Little brother, don't kill me." The green-robed old man was shocked by the sudden turn of events. He never thought that Nye Tian would be able to block the poison of his six-leaf green fungus. Moreover, Nye Tian's reaction was too fast. It was completely out of his expectations. After all, even a rank 9 demi-saint would not be able to resist the poison of his six-leaf green fungus. How could Nye Tian ignore it? Don't kill you? Nye Tian suddenly exerted strength in his hand and lifted the green-robed old man up. He said in a cold tone, "Give me a reason not to kill you. I'm from the Guild of Myriad Domains." The green-robed old man's throat was gripped. He stuttered as he finished his sentence. The Guild of Myriad Domains. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard those words. He was not afraid of the Guild of Myriad Domains. He was just worried that the old man was somehow related to Feng Qi. "What's your name?" Nye Tian asked in a deep voice as he relaxed his grip. Cough, cough, cough. "My name is Feng Shutong. I'm an elder of the Guild of Myriad Domains." Shutong coughed twice, his eyes slightly trembling. "Do you know a person called Feng Qi?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he continued to ask. "Feng Qi? You know little Qi Zi?" Hearing Nye Tian mention Feng Qi, Shutong's beady eyes shone brightly. He said excitedly, "I'm little Qi Zi's elder. According to seniority, he should call me Grandpa Jiu." Nye Tian's eyes darkened. He loosened his grip and let Shutong go. Judging from Shutong's reaction, he was not lying. Moreover, he called Feng Qi so intimately, which proved that he had a good relationship with Feng Qi. "You can leave." Nye Tian waved his hand and directly let Feng Shutong leave. Then, he took out Jiu Ji and carefully placed the holy Qi whirlpool inside. However, Shutong did not leave. Instead, he watched as Nye Tian put away the holy Qi whirlpool. His beady eyes widened in shock. "HM? Why aren't you leaving?" Seeing that Shutong did not leave, Nye Tian's face darkened as he asked cold. "Little brother, you're Feng Qi's friend, right?" Feng Shutong chuckled. The way he looked at Nye Tian gave people a feeling that he was up to no good. "Yes." Nye Tian nodded and walked out of the valley. After all, this place was not safe. Since he had already obtained the holy Qi whirlpool, of course he had to leave immediately. However, Shutong followed him. He squeezed out a smile and followed him eagerly. "Little brother, you're Feng Qi's friend. I'm Feng Qi's Grandpa Jiu. We're very close. It's not normal. I'm good friends with Feng Qi, but I don't know you." Nye Tian sped up and said cold. But no matter how fast he went, Shutong could still follow him closely. "Little brother, aren't you treating me like an outsider? I've watched little Qi grow up. No matter how you look at it, half of the credit goes to me that he's able to make such an outstanding friend like you." Feng Shutong chuckled as he followed behind Nye Tian. Nye Tian was speechless. Feng Qi's Grandpa Jiu was really shameless. Seeing that they were already far away from the valley, Nye Tian's figure paused. He looked cold at Shutong and said directly, "Old thing, don't follow me anymore. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Then, his figure moved and he left. However, Feng Shutong persevered and actually caught up to Nye Tian again. He chuckled and said, "Little brother, don't be angry. I see that we're fated to be together, so I followed you. Look at me, why don't I follow those cats and dogs? I'm begging you, go follow those cats and dogs." Nye Tian was speechless and stopped again. He looked cold at Shutong and said, "Old thing, why are you following me?" Shutong looked at Nye Tian and laughed foolishly. "Don't laugh, get straight to the point." Nye Tian's scalp went numb from Shutong's laughter and he said directly, "TQR 1-inch little brother, I want to discuss a business deal with you." Shutong's face turned serious, but it still looked wretched. Nye Tian was too lazy to talk nonsense and said directly, "It's like this, I found a few Saint Qi whirlpools, but I have no way to break the Saint energy prohibition, so I want to ask little brother for help." Feng Shutong grinned, the wrinkles on his face were very obvious, and he said with a smile. What did you say? Nie Tian did not wait for Shutong to finish. His expression changed and he shouted. He could not believe his ears. Shutong actually said that he found a holy whirlpool. Chapter 2961. Hearing Shutong's words, Nie Tian couldn't help but be stunned for a long time. Finally, he reacted and stared at the ladder with shining eyes. How is it, are you tempted now? Seeing Nie Tian's reaction, Shutong couldn't help but smile proudly. The holy whirlpool was already very rare, not to mention that he had several holy whirlpools. It would be strange if Nie Tian wasn't tempted. Old thing, you aren't playing with me, are you? Nie Tian's face darkened slightly, a hint of coldness surged in his eyes. Feng Shutong looked like an old and frivolous man, which made him suspicious. Little brother, I, Shutong, am also a person of status. How could I trick a junior like you? Shutong's old face darkened, as if he was very angry. Humph. Nie Tian couldn't help but laugh and said coldly, Who was it that ambushed me with poison just now? Just now. Shutong's old face stiffened, then he chuckled and said, I was just joking with you just now. Plus, my 6-leaf green fungus poison can only make people unconscious for a short time. It's not a poison that kills people. Really? Nie Tian's eyes were cold. He didn't quite believe Shutong. Would an old man like me lie to a little kid? Shutong was a little angry. He opened his old hand and a green gas surged in the center of his palm. Nie Tian sensed for a moment. This green gas was indeed the poison that Shutong used to ambush him. Nie Tian, this poison is indeed not a deadly poison. Looks like this old man only wants the holy whirlpools. He doesn't really want to kill you. Fat Cat's voice sounded and said to Nie Tian. Okay, I believe you. The 6-leaf green fungus poison is indeed not a poison that kills people. Nie Tian faintly smiled and said. Of course not. Shutong put away the 6-leaf green fungus and mumbled, If I really wanted to kill you, how could you still be alive? Nie Tian didn't mind Feng Shutong's mutterings. Instead, he faintly smiled and said, Old man Feng, since you said you found a few St. Chi whirlpools, take me there. Wait. Feng Shutong's small eyes flashed, but he stopped Nie Tian, smiled and said, Before we go, we have to talk about it first. I was the one who discovered the St. Chi whirlpool. You just helped me break the Saint energy seal. Well, I'll give you a drop of holy Chi liquid for every forbidden formation you break. What do you think? TQR1 asked. When Nie Tian heard Feng Shutong's words, his expression darkened. He really wanted to punch the latter's wretched face. Taking out a drop of Saint Chi liquid as a reward for breaking through a Saint energy forbidden formation, only Feng Shutong could say such a thing. Did this old thing really think that Nie Tian was a 3-year-old child who could be tricked like this? At this time, Feng Shutong noticed that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right. He couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth and said, Looking at you, you don't seem to be satisfied with the reward. How about this, I'll take a little loss. If you break through a Saint energy forbidden formation, I'll give you 2 drops of holy Chi liquid. Nie Tian's expression darkened. He glared at Feng Shutong with a murderous look. This old thing was obviously treating him like an idiot. 2 drops of holy Chi liquid is not enough? You're too greedy. Feng Shutong looked at Nie Tian and suddenly shouted, as if he had really taken a big loss. Nie Tian was speechless. This old thing was greedy to no end, but now he jumped up and said that he was greedy. Half and half. In the next moment, Nie Tian's expression darkened and he said coldly, What? Feng Shutong was stunned at first. Then, as if he had been struck by lightning, he jumped up and his voice became sharp and ear-piercing. He couldn't believe his ears. Nie Tian actually proposed to half and half with him. He had discovered 8 holy Chi whirlpools, and this was the result of his hard work over the past few days. How could he let Nie Tian take 4? He, Feng Shutong, had made countless transactions with countless people, but he had never suffered such a big loss. I said half and half. If you don't agree, then stay away from me. Nie Tian looked coldly at Feng Shu-tong. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Feng Shu-tong was stunned again. Then, he reacted and hurriedly followed. Only now did he know that he had met his match this time. When Nie Tian made a deal with others, he never took a loss. Little brother, wait a moment. We'll discuss it again. Feng Shu-tong followed behind Nie Tian and said hurriedly. Half and half. There's nothing to discuss. Nie Tianling replied coldly. At the same time, he quickened his pace. Little brother, you are Little Qi Zi's friend. I am Little Qi Zi's 9th grandfather. We have a very close relationship. There's always room for discussion. Can't we talk calmly? Feng Shu-tong followed closely behind Nie Tian. He was so tired that he was panting. Nie Tian didn't say anything. He quickened his pace. Kid, there's no such thing as what you say in a deal. Feng Shu-tong was a little anxious. He said, how about this? I found 8 holy qi whirlpools. I want 7 and I'll give you one. Is that okay? Nie Tian gave a cold laugh and didn't pay any attention to him. This old thing was too stingy. 8 holy qi whirlpools, but he only gave Nie Tian one. I'll give you 2. Feng Shu-tong's old face changed. He gritted his teeth. Nie Tian's expression didn't change. He quickened his pace. I'll give you 3. Is that okay? Feng Shu-tong really made up his mind this time. His heart was bleeding. He growled. I'll say it again. Half and half. Nie Tian's figure suddenly stopped. He stared at Feng Shu-tong and said coldly. Feng Shu-tong was shocked by Nie Tian. The muscles on his face trembled. His eyes were filled with hatred. But in the end, he still nodded. This time, he had really met his match. Okay, let's go. Nie Tian's expression instantly softened. The corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Follow me. Feng Shu-tong was a little angry. He growled. His figure moved and he led the way. Nie Tian, on the other hand, was very happy. He was going to get 4 holy qi whirlpools. About half an hour later, Feng Shu-tong brought Nie Tian to a valley. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't see any holy qi whirlpools. Old man, are you messing with me? His face darkened. He looked coldly at Feng Shu-tong. Step back. Feng Shu-tong's face darkened. He gestured for Nie Tian to step back. Then, he took a step forward. His hands formed a strange seal. Lines of runes circulated in the air. A giant whirlpool slowly appeared in midair. It was the holy qi whirlpool. Old man, you sure have some tricks up your sleeve. You actually covered the holy qi whirlpool with a boundary. Nie Tian's lips curled up. His eyes twinkled. One has to admit that though Feng Shu-tong wasn't handsome, stingy, and sly, his boundary technique was really powerful. I didn't think that this old man was not only a god alchemist, but also a boundary master. Not simple. Fat Cat couldn't help but compliment. Oomph! Feng Shu-tong removed the boundary and looked coldly at Nie Tian. He said, if I didn't hide the holy qi whirlpool, what would I do if others found it? Impressive. Nie Tian faintly smiled and praised Feng Shu-tong. Chapter 2962. Nie Tian looked at Feng Shu-tong and could not help but be taken aback. He then sent a voice transmission to Fat Cat. Fat, can you still deconstruct the structure of the Saint Force ceiling array? That's not a problem. I've already deconstructed the Saint Force ceiling array once. Although every Saint Force ceiling array is different, they are mostly the same. The problem now is, who is going to break the array? Fat Cat's face darkened as he said awkwardly. He had experience deconstructing the Saint Force ceiling array, so it was not a difficult task for him. The biggest problem now was, who was going to break the array? Feng Shu-tong only had the strength of a demi-saint, and his combat ability was far weaker than Nie Tian's. Although Nie Tian's combat ability was strong, he could not compare to share. Cher had just deconstructed a Saint Force sealing array and was now exhausted. She did not have the ability to deconstruct the array at all. Little Nia, don't tell me you don't know how to deconstruct the array? Feng Shudong's face darkened as he saw Nia Tian's awkward expression. Old man Feng, I can only deconstruct the structure of the Saint Force sealing array, but the power of the Saint Force sealing array is too strong. I can't deconstruct it. Nia Tian frowned and answered honestly. F***ck. Are you messing with me? Feng Shutong let out a strange cry and cursed when he heard Nia Tian's words. Tikur one Nia Tian's face darkened as he said, Don't tell me that a pseudo-saint alchemist like you doesn't have anything powerful on you that can help us deconstruct the array? Brat, you're really pissing me off. Feng Shudong's face stiffened as he almost fainted from anger at Nia Tian. But then, his expression turned for the better and he said to Nia Tian, Hurry up and reveal the structure of the Saint Force sealing array. Old man Feng, are you sure you can deconstruct the array? Nia Tian looked at Feng Shutong and asked doubtfully. If Fat Cat could decipher the structure of the formation, but Feng Shutong couldn't, it would be very awkward. Don't talk nonsense, hurry up. Feng Shutong was almost angered to death by Nia Tian, and said impatiently. All right. Nia Tian agreed, and the sword will on his body began to slowly surge. Then, under the guidance of Fat Cat, he used his sword will to mark out the diagram of the Saint Power Forbidden formation. Feng Shutong was dumbfounded by the sight. He couldn't believe the scene in front of him. Although he wasn't a God Array Master, he had seen other God Array Masters break arrays, and none of them were as smooth as Nia Tian. It's done. After a while, Nia Tian smiled faintly as he deciphered the diagram. Actually, he didn't have to do much. All he had to do was follow Fat Cat's instructions and sketch out the diagram of the formation. Little Nia, you're amazing. Feng Shutong looked at Nia Tian, and his old face was like a blooming chrysanthemum. He chuckled and said, Such a young God Array Master, this is the first time I've seen such an old man. I heard that the structure of the Saint Power Forbidden formation is very complicated. Even a fake Divine Array Master would need a long time to decipher it. You can decipher the structure so quickly. Don't tell me you're a fake rank 9 Divine Array Master? From what I know, the strongest God Array Master in the Thousand Domains Guild is only a fake rank 6 Divine Array Master. After saying that, Feng Shutong looked at Nia Tian with a strange expression. He couldn't believe that there was such a young fake Divine Array Master in this world. He even suspected that Nia Tian was the reincarnation of an Array Master. Old man Feng, what level of God Array Master I am is not a problem for you to worry about. You should hurry up and decipher the formation. Nia Tian smiled faintly. All right. Feng Shutong nodded and a scroll appeared in his hand. He unfolded it. The moment the scroll was unfolded, a surge of sword essence gushed out and condensed into a human figure in the air. When Nia Tian saw this, especially when he saw the face of the sword essence, he couldn't help but exclaim, Senior Sword Sage. At this moment, the sword will shadow that appeared beside him was the person he had met in the frozen ruins, Soaring Cloud Sword Saint Yenlingyun. Feng Shutong exclaimed and smiled. You know Yenlingyun? Yes. Nia Tian nodded and said, I met Feng Qi in the frozen ruins. At that time, Senior Sword Sage also went to find Feng Qi, so we know each other. I see. Feng Shutong chuckled and said, Let's begin. This is a sword essence clone of Senior Sword Sage? Can it really break the forbidden formation? Nia Tian looked at Feng Shutong and couldn't help but worry. Of course. Feng Shutong couldn't help but smile and said, Yenlingyun is a rank 8 demigod after all. Although this sword essence clone is much weaker than his main body, it still has the strength of a rank 5 demigod. It should have no problem breaking this forbidden formation. Yes. Nia Tian was relieved when he heard Feng Shudong's words. Cher was only a rank 9 demigod, and yet she could break the forbidden formation. Since Yen Lingyun's sword essence clone had the strength of a rank 5 demigod, it naturally could break the forbidden formation. In fact, the scariest thing about the holy formation was its complex structure. As long as the structure of the formation was deciphered, it would be easy to break it. It was just that Nye Tian's strength was a little weak, which was why it was so difficult. If he were a rank 9 demigod, according to the diagram, he could destroy the formation I and break the forbidden formation with a single slash of his sword. Before, Cher had to destroy some of the formation patterns before she dared to attack the formation I because she was too weak. Boom. In the next moment, the sword-intent doppelganger followed Nye Tian's instructions and thrust out its sword. A sword shadow whizzed out and bombarded the Saint energy-restrictive formation. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a series of explosions sounded, and the entire forbidden formation was destroyed. Although it was just a sword essence clone, the speed at which it broke the forbidden formation was much faster than Cher. That was the result of the difference in strength. Little Nye, the first holy chi whirlpool must be mine first, Feng Shutong said with a chuckle when he saw that the forbidden formation was broken. Sure. Nye Tian nodded. After all, there were still 7 holy chi whirlpools waiting for them. Moreover, Feng Shutong did put in more effort. Feng Shutong chuckled and took a step forward. He was about to use a space-time container to store the holy chi whirlpool, but he suddenly thought of something and stopped. Little Nye, I saw you put the holy chi whirlpool in a space-time vortex just now. If I'm not mistaken, that's an independent small world, right? He suddenly turned to look at Nye Tian and chuckled. Yes. Nye Tian nodded and smiled. If you're willing, I can help you put the holy chi whirlpool in Juji. What do you think? Although a space-time container with enough space could also store the holy chi whirlpool, during the process, some holy chi would inevitably be lost. However, it was different if Juji was used. Juji was big enough to store the holy chi whirlpool without losing any holy chi. Alright, thank you. Feng Shutong thought for a while and nodded with a smile. He already had a lot of trust in Nye Tian, and could let Nye Tian temporarily keep the holy chi whirlpool. Chapter 2963. 3 days later, in an ice valley on the Arctic snow mountain. Ha ha ha, the Saint Force restrictive formation has been broken. In the ice valley, there was a burst of joyful laughter. It was Feng Shutong. Old Feng, this is the 8th holy aura whirlpool. We can finally rest for a while. Nye Tian looked at Feng Shutong and said with a faint smile. The two of them spent 3 days and finally took down the 8 holy aura whirlpools. Little Nye quickly put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities. I really want to see what your 9 extremities look like inside, Feng Shutong chuckled. Feng Shutong chuckled. He had long been itching to enter the 9 extremities to take a look at what it was like inside. Don't rush. Wait for me to put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities first, Nye Tian said with a faint smile. He stepped forward and prepared to put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities. Ah! But at this moment, there was a sudden scream from afar. The scream was sharp and filled with panic. Huh! Nye Tian's expression changed. He said, Fat, I'll leave this to you. I'll go take a look. After saying that, he moved and rushed over. And behind him, the figure of Fat Cat appeared. The cat held the 9 extremities with its paw, but the cat's face was a little unwilling. Huh! Feng Shutong was stunned by the scene in front of him. He looked at Fat Cat in disbelief. His old face froze and he couldn't speak for a long time. Fat Cat didn't pay attention to him and put the holy aura whirlpool into the 9 extremities. On the other side, in a snowy valley tens of thousands of meters away, an unsightly scene was unfolding. Ah, go away, don't touch me! A delicate and thin girl in green screamed and quickly retreated. In front of her, there was a young martial artist with a lecherous smile on his face. He walked over step by step. Several black-clothed cultivators looked at the scene before them mockingly as they laughed maniacally. Ha ha ha, I didn't think that the beloved daughter of the Yu family would dare to enter the Arctic snow mountain alone. Isn't she tired of living? I heard that this little girl is the most beloved daughter of the Yu family's patriarch. Back then, when the patriarch went to the Yu family to propose marriage on behalf of the seventh young master, he mentioned this little girl. Unfortunately, the Yu family's patriarch refused this marriage. Who would have thought that this little girl would actually fall into the hands of our seventh young master? These black-clothed cultivators looked like they were watching a joke. Rong Chiwei, don't come any closer. If you dare to take another step forward, I'll kill myself in front of you. The green-clothed woman, Yu Ruo'er, screamed. Her eyes were already filled with tears. Yu Ruo'er, it won't be that easy for you to die. Rong Chiwei chuckled and stretched out his hand. A gust of qi enveloped Yu Ruo'er, trapping her in place. Yu Ruo'er suddenly felt that she couldn't move her body. Her delicate face turned as white as a sheet, and tears rolled down her cheeks. Yu Ruo'er, your father rejected the marriage proposal of the Rong family. But now, aren't you still in my hands? Rong Chiwei took a step forward and suddenly reached out and tore off half of Yu Ruo'er's clothes, revealing her snow-white skin. Wow, this little girl is so fair and tender. The seventh young master is so lucky. We'll soon be able to see the seventh young master display his invincible might. It'll be a feast for our eyes. Hee, the seventh young master has countless women. This little girl is clearly still a virgin. I wonder if she'll be able to endure it later. The Rong family's cultivator said with a lustful look in his eyes and saliva dripping down to his chin. Rong Chiwei, if you dare to hurt me, my father will not let you go. Tears fell from Yu Ruo'er's eyes. She struggled with all her might, but she couldn't move at all. She was only at the pinnacle of immortal state, while Rong Chiwei was a fifth-order demi-saint. The gap between the two was so huge that it couldn't be described with words. She couldn't even fight back against Rong Chiwei. Yu Ruo'er, don't you think it's ridiculous that you're still using the Yu family to scare me at a time like this? Rong Chiwei smiled coldly. His lustful gaze was like tentacles that wandered around Yu Ruo'er's body without restraint. As he spoke, he took a step forward and stretched a hand towards Yu Ruo'er's small face. Animal, let go of my miss. At this time, a voice suddenly rang out. Then, a figure charged over and slammed a palm towards Rong Chiwei. Ju Chen. Yu Ruo'er's beautiful eyes flashed as she looked at the figure and cried out in shock. The person who had attacked at this time was her personal attendant, Ju Chen. She had secretly entered the Arctic snow mountain without the Yu family's knowledge. She had only brought Ju Chen with her. Ju Chen was about the same age as her, but he was already a first-order demi-saint. Unfortunately, Ju Chen still couldn't fight back against Rong Chiwei at all. TQR 1-inch damn servant, you're courting death. Rong Chiwei suddenly turned around and roared fiercely. Then, he directly slammed his palm forward. Vigorous energy surged out and crashed towards Ju Chen. Rong Chiwei was a fifth-order demi-saint expert, so the power of his palm was extremely strong. Ju Chen was only a first-order demi-saint, so he couldn't withstand this palm at all. Without a doubt, if this palm landed, Ju Chen would die without a doubt. Boom! At this moment of life and death, a sword shadow suddenly pierced through the air and descended from the sky, blocking the fatal palm for Ju Chen. Moreover, Rong Chiwei was forced to take a few steps back by this sword shadow. He staggered and almost fell, looking extremely pathetic. Rong Chiwei steadied himself and suddenly raised his head. His gaze landed on a silver-haired martial artist. At this time, this silver-haired martial artist was looking at him with a gloomy expression, his eyes surging with murderous intent. Rong Chiwei's heart sank inexplicably, and he was extremely shocked. He's only a first-order demi-saint. Why do I feel like I'm falling into an abyss when he's staring at me? It must be an illusion. The next moment, Rong Chiwei calmed down. His eyes were extremely cold, and he said in a deep voice, "Brat, who are you? Do you think you can poke your nose into the business of me, Rong Chiwei?" Nye Tian looked at Rong Chiwei, the corner of his mouth twitching, and he said with a faint smile, "Sorry, I just like to poke my nose into other people's business, especially the business of scum like you." "You?" Rong Chiwei's face darkened. He didn't expect Nye Tian to be so domineering and not take him seriously at all. "Brat, don't you know who we are? We are from the Rong family. If you dare to offend our seventh young master, you're dead." At this time, one of the Rong family martial artists couldn't stand it anymore and started to clamor. "Rong family!" Nye Tianling suddenly turned around and locked his cold eyes on that Rong family martial artist. He said coldly, "I've never heard of the Rong family, but listen to me. Now, either get lost or die." That Rong family martial artist was stunned by Nye Tian's aura, and then his eyes turned cold as he roared, "Brat, you're courting death." As soon as he finished, his figure moved and he struck out with his palm, intending to kill Nye Tian. This Rong family martial artist was a second-order demi-saint, and he was obviously relying on his superior cultivation to kill Nye Tian. Whoosh! However, at this moment, Nye Tian's body moved slightly. A flash of a sword flashed, and blood appeared in the air. Chapter 2964. As the sword ray fell, blood splattered everywhere, and the scene fell into dead silence. Rong Chiwei and the others were utterly shocked as they looked at Nye Tian in disbelief, as if they were looking at a monster. They simply could not believe what they had just seen. To them, it was simply impossible. It was not unusual for a first-level demi-saint to kill a second-level demi-saint. The gap between a first-level demi-saint and a second-level demi-saint was not that great in the first place. However, the way Nye Tian killed a second-level demi-saint in a one-sided manner was simply too shocking. He did not draw his sword at all, and merely his sword had killed a second-level demi-saint. Was Nye Tian really just a first-level demi-saint martialist? At that moment, Yuruar and Zhu Chen were also stunned as they looked at Nye Tian in surprise and fear. A few seconds later, Rong Chiwei and the others came to their senses and involuntarily retreated. "I gave you a chance just now, but you didn't cherish it." But at that moment, Nye Tian's cold voice rang out. "It's too late to leave now." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As the bone-chilling voice trailed off, several sword rays appeared in the air, accompanied by streaks of blood. Several Rong family martialists fell to the ground, dying in the same way as the previous one, decapitated. Only Rong Chiwei was left, and he looked at Nye Tian with trembling eyes, his teeth chattering, unable to say a word. "You deserve to die." Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he took a step forward. His entire body surged with sword aura, and a massive sword pressure appeared, rolling like the sea and exceptionally terrifying. Rong Chiwei's face was ashen as he felt the violent pressure, and his eyes were filled with extreme despair. He could not imagine that a first-level demi-saint could unleash such a terrifying sword pressure. At that moment, if Nye Tian were to take a step forward, he would be crushed into minced meat. "Boy Nye, stay your hand." But at that moment a voice suddenly rang out and a figure rushed over. It was Feng Shutong. "Old Feng, are you going to protect this scum?" Nye Tian looked at Feng Shutong and frowned. "Let him scram first." Feng Shutong waved his hand, indicating that Rong Chiwei could scram. Rong Chiwei felt as if he had been pardoned and ran away in terror. Nye Tian furrowed his brows. It was not appropriate for him to make another move. "Thank you, young master." At this moment, Yuruar stood up and walked in front of Nye Tian. "It's nothing." Nye Tian smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. Then, Yuruar took out her clothes and put them on. Her frightened expression slowly recovered. TQR1 Nye Tian glanced at the follower called Zhu Chen. The latter's injuries weren't light. He had most likely been injured while protecting his master. Nye Tian helped him heal for a while, then asked Feng Shutong to take out some divine pills for him to consume. After dealing with these two, Nie Tian couldn't help but look at Feng Shutong and ask, "Old Feng, why did you stop me from killing that scum? Boy Nie, do you know that guy is from the Rong family?" Feng Shutong laughed and raised his brows. Rong family? Nie Tian's brows furrowed, his expression puzzled. He had never heard of the Rong family. "You don't know of the Rong family?" Feng Shutong frowned and asked in shock when he saw Nie Tian's reaction. He hadn't thought that Nie Tian would be in the Sacred Soul region and not know of the Rong family. "I don't know." Nie Tian shook his head and said awkwardly, "I haven't been in the Sacred Soul region for long, so I don't know much about the major forces in the Sacred Soul region." Feng Shutong looked at Nie Tian and his face darkened. He continued, "That's good. This time, a seed of the sacred world has appeared in the Arctic snow mountain. All the major forces in the Sacred Soul region will move upon hearing about it. You will soon know which major forces are in the Sacred Soul region. Old Feng, why don't you introduce them to me first?" Nie Tian's lips twitched and he said with a smile. "Sigh." Feng Shutong sighed and said helplessly, "All right, this old man will reluctantly tell you." Then, he began to introduce them. There are 10 major forces in the Sacred Soul region. They are known as the 1 sect, 2 academies, 3 families, and 4 dynasties. 1 sect, 2 academies, 3 families, and 4 dynasties. Nie Tian's eyes flashed and he secretly noted it down. Feng Shutong nodded and continued, "The 1 sect refers to the 9 Mysteries sect. This sect is very mysterious and will not reveal itself under normal circumstances. However, its strength is not to be underestimated. It should be the number 1 force in the Sacred Soul region. The 2 academies refers to the Holy Soul Academy and the Netherworld Academy. These 2 academies are very powerful. Many powerful cultivators in the Sacred Soul region graduated from these 2 academies. The 3 families refers to the 3 family forces. They are the Mu family, the Rong family, and the Yu family. The 4 dynasties refers to the 4 great dynasties of the Sacred Heaven region. They are the Holy Moon dynasty, the Xiantian dynasty, the Wuji dynasty, and the Shunluo dynasty. After listening to Feng Shutong's explanation, Nie Tian couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He didn't expect that a small Sacred Soul region would have so many powerful forces. Although Nie Tian didn't know about the existence of the 10 major forces, he had already interacted with many of them. There was no need to mention the Holy Soul Academy. He was now a student of the Holy Soul Academy. Nie Tian had interacted with the Mu family, the Rong family, and the Yu family. He had completely offended the Mu family and the Rong family. Luckily, Nie Tian didn't have much conflict with the Yu family. Instead, he owed them a debt of gratitude. After all, he had just saved Yu Ruar. Nie Tian guessed that the half-divine array master that appeared previously was that Elder Yu. He should also be from the Yu family. However, he didn't have much conflict with this Elder Yu. At most, there was a small misunderstanding. As for the 4 dynasties, Nie Tian already knew 2 of them, the Holy Moon dynasty and the Xiantian dynasty. He was even with the Princess Royal of the Holy Moon dynasty. Although the Xiantian dynasty was offended by Nie Tian on the surface, the Xiantian Patriarch had an agreement with Nie Tian. "Elder Feng, will the 10 major forces appear when the seed of the sacred world appears?" Nie Tian looked at Feng Shutong and asked with a frown. "Not necessarily." Feng Shutong shook his head and said, "The 9 Mysteries sect hasn't appeared for a long time. I don't know if they will appear this time. The Wuji dynasty and the Shunluo dynasty are in the middle of a war. They probably won't have time to care about the seed of the sacred world. But the Netherworld Academy will probably come. This academy has a feud with the Holy Soul Academy. There was a war between the 2 academies. The previous dean of the Netherworld Academy died in the hands of the previous dean of the Holy Soul Academy." Nie Tian nodded. He didn't expect the Holy Soul Domain to have an academy that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Holy Soul Academy. It seemed like the Holy Soul Domain was far more complicated than Ye Tian had imagined. He really didn't know what Hua Iru had planned to let him snatch the seed of the sacred world from the hands of so many powerful forces. Then, Nye Tian and Feng Shutong chatted as they walked, preparing to leave the Arctic snow mountain. Chapter 2965. The sudden attack made Nye Tian's eyes narrow, and he reacted quickly. Sword will surged from his body, and the starry sky slash appeared in his hand. He thrust the sword straight at the void. Boom! The next moment, the sword and the blade collided and the void trembled. Then, the blade and the sword shattered at the same time, turning into a raging wave that wreaked havoc in the air. Nye Tian could not help but take a few steps back under the impact of the violent force. At the same time, a sharp blade wielder appeared in the sky. His eyes were cold and murderous as he stared at Nye Tian. Godly blade soul! Godly saber soul! Nye Tian's heart sank as he looked at the man with the saber in front of him. The blade wielder's aura was as vast and vigorous as the sea, and the sword will around him was extremely violent. This person had the strength of a 9th-level demi-saint, and his blade had reached the godly blade soul level. More importantly, this blade wielder was very young. He should be under 10,000 years old. Nye Tian was very confused. Why did this blade wielder attack him directly? He did not know him at all. Big brother! At that moment, Yuruar looked at the blade wielder and shouted in surprise. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and he finally realized that this blade wielder was Yuruar's big brother. Roar, what did I tell you? I told you not to follow me. Why didn't you listen? Yu Tonghai's eyes turned cold as he glared at Yuruar. Although he was very angry, it was obvious from his eyes that he loved his sister very much. It was precisely because of this that he was so angry. He only had one sister. If something happened to her, how would he explain it to his father? Big brother, I know I was wrong, Yuruar said in a small voice, her face nervous. Okay. Yu Tonghai replied cold, and then looked at Ju Chen with a vicious look. He growled, Ju Chen, who gave you the courage to bring the young lady to such a dangerous place? Young master, Ju Chen knows his mistake. Ju Chen frowned and knelt down, but there was not much panic on his face. Even though his knees were on the ground, he was still neither servile nor overbearing. Idiot! Yu Tonghai roared angrily. Then, he raised his arm and a saber intent whizzed out, attacking Ju Chen. Nye Tian could not help but frown upon seeing this. He took a step forward and summoned a sword intent to block the saber intent. He could tell that Yu Tonghai wanted to leave a scar on Ju Chen's face. As a follower, Ju Chen had failed to protect Yuruar well, so this was indeed his fault. However, he had already tried his best. Yu Tonghai had gone too far by using such a method to punish him. Yu Tonghai's face darkened and his cold gaze locked onto Nye Tian. He said in a low voice, How dare you? I'm teaching my servant a lesson. What does that have to do with you? None of my business. Nye Tian frowned slightly and said indifferently, I just think that Ju Chen has already done his best. You leaving a knife mark on his face is an insult to him. This kind of punishment is too cruel. Impudent! Yu Tonghai roared and said coldly, Who do you think you are? How dare you criticize me? I haven't asked you yet. Why are you with Roar? Nye Tian frowned and his expression darkened. He had not expected Yu Tonghai to be so unreasonable. He was like a rabid dog that bit whoever he caught. Big brother, he's our benefactor. Before Nye Tian could speak, Yuruar stepped forward and recounted what had just happened. When Yu Tonghai heard Yuruar's story, his dark expression finally eased a little. Big brother, it's all my fault. I forced Ju Chen to bring me here. Please don't punish him, Yuruar said carefully when she saw that Yu Tonghai's anger had subsided. Ju Chen, I'll let you off this time, but remember, this will not happen again. Yu Tonghai said coldly, indicating that Zhu Chun could stand up. Then, his gaze fell on Nie Tian. His gaze was not friendly as he asked darkly, "Who are you? Do I need to tell you who I am?" Nie Tianling replied coldly. If Yu Tonghai spoke politely, he would, of course, respond politely. However, Yu Tonghai's swaggering attitude made him very uncomfortable. "HM?" Yu Tonghai looked at Nie Tian, his expression darkening. He said, "Stinking brat, I'm afraid you have ulterior motives for getting close to Ruar." When Nie Tian heard this, his expression instantly darkened. If this guy wasn't Yu Ruar's big brother, he would have attacked a long time ago. This person had a bad temper, was ruthless, and was especially petty. If Nie Tian really wanted to do something to Yu Ruar, would the latter still be standing here? "Big brother, don't talk about my benefactor like that." Yu Ruar's expression darkened. It was clear that she could not bear to hear this and was angry. Yu Tonghai ignored her. His eyes stared at Nie Tian and said coldly, "Brat, if you don't speak, then it proves that you have a guilty conscience. Speak, what are you trying to do by getting close to Ruar?" Nie Tian frowned and his expression darkened. He did not speak, but this Yu Tonghai was not done. "Do you think that if I wanted to do something to your sister, you would still be able to see her here?" Nie Tian's eyes darkened and he said coldly, "Brat, I think you've taken a fancy to the power of our Yu family and want to curry favor with the powerful." Yu Tonghai smiled sinisterly and had an arrogant attitude. "Curry favor with the powerful?" Nie Tian frowned even more and said, "You think too highly of yourself. Your Yu family is indeed powerful, but I, Nie Tian, am not a villain who wants to curry favor with the powerful. I only saved Miss Ruar because I saw injustice on the road. And to be honest, I really don't think much of your Yu family's power." TQR1 said. Yu Tonghai's eyes turned cold when he heard Nie Tian's words. From his point of view, Nie Tian's words were an insult to the Yu family. "If you don't like me, then get lost," Nie Tian said coldly and turned to leave, not bothering to waste words with Yu Tonghai. Yu Ruar was so anxious that her face was red, but she did not know what to do. "Do you think you can just walk away after insulting the Yu family?" At this moment, Yu Tonghai suddenly let out a fierce roar. His entire body surged with saber intent, vigorous and violent. He was actually going to attack Nie Tian. "If you want to fight, I'll fight with you." Nie Tian's figure froze for a moment before he suddenly turned around and glared at Yu Tonghai. "Do you really think that I'm afraid of you?" he said coldly. Yu Tonghai had the strength of a rank 9 demi-saint, and he was also a soul bladesman, which made him very frightening. However, if he were to fight to the death with Nie Tian, the outcome would be uncertain. Moreover, with Nie Tian's experience in tough battles, his chances of winning were very high. Come, let's fight." Feng Shu Tong, who was at the side, not only did not try to stop the fight, but he instead chuckled and looked at Nie Tian with a lecherous gaze. He really wanted to see with his own eyes exactly how strong Nie Tian's battle prowess was. Nie Tian's figure moved and leaped into the air, standing opposite Yu Tonghai. The two of them stood in the air, their figures as sharp as swords. A great battle was about to break out. What a good show! I've come just in time. However, it was at that moment that a cold voice suddenly spoke. Then, a figure appeared in the void. Chapter 2966. Yu Tonghai's face darkened when he saw that it was Rong Chiwei. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and his killing intent burst out like a breached dam. Yu Ruar had already told him everything, and he was going to look for Rong Chiwei. He did not expect the latter to show up. Nie Tian looked at Rong Chiwei and could not help but freeze. He did not expect that Rong Chiwei would dare to come back. Humph! At this moment, however, Rong Chiwei wasn't afraid in the slightest. Instead, he let out a cold, arrogant laugh. His vicious eyes swept across Nye Tian and Yu Tonghai as he said in a mocking tone, "It seems that my appearance has disturbed your battle. Rong Chiwei, you shameless villain. I was going to look for you, but you came to me on your own accord. I'm not Yu Tonghai if I don't kill you today." Yu Tonghai's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Rong Chiwei. He was clearly furious. Although he was very dissatisfied with Nye Tian, his hatred for Rong Chiwei was undoubtedly deeper. "Humph." Rong Chiwei smiled cold and said, "Yu Tonghai, did you think that I would come back alone?" As soon as he said that, a dozen martial artists appeared in the void behind him, each of them extremely ferocious and filled with killing intent. "So, you've found help." Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw that, and he smiled faintly. Rong Chiwei had just barely escaped with his life, and now that he had returned, he was definitely not alone. Then, Nye Tian's divine sense swept over the dozen martial artists of the Rong family, and his face darkened. Among the dozen martial artists of the Rong family, the weakest had the strength of a high-level demi-saint, and there were even a few stage 9 demi-saints. One of them, a middle-aged man with a knife scar on his face, had the strength of a stage 1 demi-saint. Such a lineup was not strong, but it was enough to pose a great threat to Nye Tian and the others. "Damn it!" Yu Tonghai's face darkened when he saw the dozen martial artists of the Rong family and sensed their aura. He did not expect that Rong Chiwei had brought so many powerhouses with him. He had left in a hurry to look for Yu Ruor, so he did not bring anyone with him. At this moment, he couldn't help but glance at Nye Tian. His gaze was clearly asking for help. Although he felt that Nye Tian's strength was average, he was still a helper. Nye Tian glanced at Yu Tonghai and said cold, "I'll leave the strongest pseudo-saint martial artist to you. Leave the rest to me." Since Yu Tonghai was the young master of the Yu family and a soul blade wielder, it would not be a problem for him to deal with a pseudo-saint as a rank 9 demi-saint. As for the other Rong family martial artists, Nye Tian was not afraid even if they were demi-saints. "Yes." Yu Tonghai was stunned for a moment, as if he hadn't expected Nye Tian to say this. When he recovered, he nodded. "Old Feng, I'll leave Lady Ru'er and the rest to you." Nye Tian looked at Feng Shu Tong and said lightly. Although Feng Shu Tong's strength was not much, he had various means to protect Yu Ruor and the rest while protecting himself. "No problem." Feng Shu Tong chuckled, his eyes emitting a blazing light. He did not intend to make a move at the moment, as he was eager to see how powerful Nye Tian's combat ability was. "You two think you can stop so many Rong family martial artists with just the two of you? Do you think the Rong family is a bunch of pushovers?" Rong Chiwei smiled cold, his eyes brimming with killing intent as he growled, "Everyone, kill them!" "Yes." A dozen Rong family martial artists answered in unison, their voices thunderous and imposing. TQR1 in the next moment, a dozen figures moved at the same time, directly surrounding Nye Tian and Yu Tonghai. "Young master of the Yu family, your time has come." At that moment, the scarred martial artist growled and glared at Yu Tonghai with eyes as fierce as a wolf. Then, a black saber appeared in his hand, surging with saber will and imposing aura. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and his face darkened. He did not expect that the scarred martial artist was also a saber wielder. Moreover, his realm of saber principles had also reached the legendary saber soul level. Therefore, Yu Tonghai's advantage as a saber wielder was gone. It would be difficult for him to defeat the scarred martial artist. Boom! In the next moment, the scarred martial artist moved. The saber in his hand slashed out wildly. Suddenly, the shadow of the saber was like a mountain cutting across the sky. The void sank and the sound of the saber resounded in the air. Yu Tonghai's eyes darkened and the raging sea dragon head saber appeared in his hand. He slashed out angrily, and the sound of a dragon roaring and a tsunami was heard in the air. Boom! Then, the two saber shadows collided and the void shook. violent and vigorous saber will suddenly surged and wreaked havoc in the space. Although this Yu Tonghai is very arrogant, he's not weak, Nie Tian muttered to himself as the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. He had to admit that he had underestimated Yu Tonghai's strength. The strength of the latter's saber will was beyond his expectations. With such strength, even if Yu Tonghai could not defeat the scarred martial artist, he would at least be undefeatable. As soon as Nie Tian finished speaking, he moved. With one heavy step, his body flew up into the sky like a dragon. He wanted to attract the attention of all the Rong family martial artists so that the battle between Yu Tonghai and the scarred martial artist would not be affected. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, more than a dozen Rong clan martial artists shot up into the sky and dashed towards Nie Tian. Good timing. Nie Tian hovered in the air, having gained an advantageous position. The corner of his mouth twitched as his cold eyes locked onto a stage 7 demi-saint martial artist from the Rong family. Then, the starry sky slash appeared in his hand as he unleashed his sword will in a frenzy. As he thrust his sword forward, the shadow of the sword swooped down like a dragon from the heavens. Ah! The martial artist screamed as his face paled when he saw the shadow of the sword above his head. He did not expect that Nie Tian would suddenly stop and even attack first. Boom! The martial artist did not have time to react. The moment the shadow of the sword fell, he was swallowed up, and not even his bones were left. Hiss! The other warriors of the Rong family couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they saw this scene. Their faces were filled with terror. They clearly did not expect that the silver-haired martial artist, who was merely a rank 1, demi-saint, would have such formidable combat ability. Killing a rank 7, demi-saint with a single strike meant that his combat ability was comparable to that of a rank 9, demi-saint. Be careful. That silver-haired brat's ability is strange. Don't be careless. Rong Chiwei shouted from below to warn the Rong family martial artist. He had already witnessed Nie Tian's strength with his own eyes, which was why he was not too surprised that Nie Tian had killed a rank 7 demi-saint in an instant. However, there was a faint worry in his heart. He had a feeling that Nie Tian's combat ability was stronger than what he saw. Moreover, the dozen Rong family martial artists might not be a match for Nie Tian even if they joined forces. This worry caused his expression to become unsightly. But in the very next moment, his eyes flickered and appeared extremely vicious and cold. He suddenly turned around and locked his gaze on Feng Shutong and the others. Chapter 2967. Feng Shutong did not panic at all when he saw Rong Chiwei looking at him. Instead, he laughed and said, "Rong brat, it's all thanks to this old man that you're still alive. You're not going to bite the hand that feeds you and attack me, are you?" Previously, Nie Tian was about to kill Rong Chiwei, but Feng Shutong stopped him all of a sudden, which allowed Rong Chiwei to live until now. Now, Rong Chiwei actually wanted to attack Feng Shutong. If this was not biting the hand that feeds him, what else could it be? "Old thing, you asked that brat to let me go because you're afraid of the power of the Rong family." Rong Chiwei smiled coldly and said, "I'll kill you right now. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being that brat's friend." As he spoke, Rong Chiwei took a step forward and released his aura in a frenzy. It was extremely violent and terrifying. TQR1 The corner of Feng Shutong's mouth twitched. He had a playful look on his face. It seemed that he had released the wrong person when he asked Nie Tian to let Rong Chiwei go. However, he was certainly not afraid of Rong Chiwei. Even if he only had the strength of a first-level demi-saint, he still had hundreds and thousands of ways to kill Rong Chiwei. Die! At this moment, Rong Chiwei let out a strange cry. His silhouette flickered as he slammed his palm downwards. A majestic palm energy surged out, condensing into a shadow of a palm that pressed down on Feng Shutong like a mountain. "Watch out, senior!" Yuruar screamed as she saw the scene. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. However, Feng Shutong was not nervous at all. Instead, he had a strange smile on his face. In the next moment, a scroll appeared in his hand and he opened it. Suddenly, the terrifying power of a formation surged out. Endless runes of the formation flowed wildly in the void and instantly formed a large formation. Bang! Then, the terrifying palm shadow fell and bombarded the large formation. A muffled sound was heard in the air as the palm shadow collapsed. Huh! Rong Chiwei's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw that, and his face turned gloomy. He did not expect that Feng Shutong would have a formation scroll on him. Moreover, he felt that the aura of this array formation was a little strange. It actually made him feel a little uneasy. Little bastard from the Rong clan, of all things you shouldn't have done, you shouldn't have made a move against me. At that moment, Feng Shutong let out a strange laugh. After which, he took a step forward and something strange happened. The runes of the array formation in the space suddenly started to circulate, instantly burning in the air. Then, it enveloped Feng Shutong's body, condensing into an armor of raging flames. What's going on? Rong Chiwei had never seen such a scene and couldn't help but cry out in shock. Little bastard, die for me. Immediately after, Feng Shutong sneered. He extended his palm and a sword of flames appeared in his hand. He raised his hand and a sharp sword of flames whizzed through the air. Swoosh! Rong Chiwei's gaze shook, and his figure instantly retreated. However, he was still a step too late, and one of his arms was actually directly severed by the flaming blades. Blood gushed out and dyed half of his body red. Ah! Rong Chiwei howled in pain, and his voice resounded through the sky. Seventh young master. The Rong clan's martial artists heard Rong Chiwei's scream and immediately turned around. What they saw made their expressions change. That scrawny old man only had the strength of a first-level demi-saint. How could he have injured Rong Chiwei so badly? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and save me! Rong Chiwei endured the pain and howled in a strange voice. The Rong clan's martial artists came to their senses and simultaneously moved towards Rong Chiwei. However, at that moment, Feng Shutong stopped attacking. Moreover, the armor of flames around his body had also disappeared. He raised his head to look at Nye Tian and said faintly, "Little Nye, I'll leave the rest to you." He did not want to fight with the Rong clan's martial artists. Instead, he wanted to see how strong Nye Tian's combat ability was. Seventh young master, are you all right? A group of Rong clan's martial artists surrounded Rong Chiwei and asked nervously. Rong Chiwei's eyes were crimson and fierce like a ferocious beast. He pointed at Feng Shutong and roared, "Kill him!" Yes. A dozen Rong clan's martial artists answered in unison. Their ferocious eyes immediately locked onto Feng Shutong. Boom! However, at that moment, the void high above suddenly trembled. Then, an extremely violent sword shadow appeared. It was tens of thousands of meters long, and it pressed down on the void with a roar. The Rong clan's martial artists felt that something was wrong. They immediately raised their heads and reacted in an instant. They all attacked in unison, and a series of violent attacks were launched towards the sword shadow. Bang bang bang! Muffled sounds of explosions were heard in the void. However, the sword shadow's aura was extremely strong, and it was not shattered. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and several weaker Rong clan's martial artists were devoured by the sword shadow and died tragically. Even the stronger Rong clan's martial artists were sent flying by the impact of the sword shadow, leaving bloody trails in the air. Nye Tian, your combat ability is indeed terrifying. Feng Shutong's small eyes could not help but twinkle when he saw that, and he exclaimed in shock. He had already guessed that Nye Tian's combat ability was absolutely amazing, and it was far from being comparable to a martial artist of the same level. However, he did not expect that Nye Tian's combat ability was actually so terrifying. At that moment, Nye Tian stepped out and stood coldly in the air. His eyes were deep and murderous. He had already used all his strength in that sword attack just now. Although this sword attack could not kill all the Rong clan's martial artists, it directly defeated the other party. In the next moment, Nie Tian's eyes turned and locked onto Rong Chiwei. The corners of his mouth twitched and he said coldly, "Rong Chiwei, you just survived, but you don't know how to cherish it. This time, no one can save you." When Rong Chiwei was locked onto by Nie Tian's gaze, his body trembled in fear, and he actually had the intention to retreat. He never dreamed that Nie Tian's combat ability would be so terrifying. At that moment, Nie Tian's figure moved at extreme speed. Like a shocking rainbow, he directly attacked Rong Chiwei. Nie Tian knew that Rong Chiwei's strength was not strong, but his status was very high. If Rong Chiwei was killed, then the Rong clan's martial artists would be in chaos. Boom! Nie Tian was in the air, and sword intent surged outside his body. He slashed out with his sword, and the sword shadow broke through the air and blasted towards Rong Chiwei. "Save me!" In an instant, Rong Chiwei felt the aura of death approaching. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and he screamed, "Seventh young master!" When the surrounding Rong clan's martial artists saw this scene, their faces instantly became panicked. However, at this time, it was too late for them to make a move. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow fell, and a violent power instantly erupted. The sword light shone brightly, blooming in the void, and it was incomparably dazzling. However, under this dazzling brilliance, there was the most terrifying killing intent. Rong Chiwei's eyes instantly widened. He wanted to resist, but he was unable to do so. Chapter 2968. Rong Chiwei was killed by Nie Tian with a single slash. The tragic scene made all the Rong family martial artists stiffen and speechless. Nie Tian was simply too ferocious. He had killed Rong Chiwei just like that. Feng Shutong could not help but frown when he saw that. Not only did Nie Tian have terrifying combat ability, but he was also very talented in combat. His killing of Rong Chiwei with a single slash was obviously to intimidate the Rong family martial artists. On the other side, Yuror and Zhu Chen were also dumbfounded. "Die, all of you!" At that moment, Nie Tian moved again. His lips curled into a cold smile as the astral soul wings appeared on his back and he moved at top speed. Boom! 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 In the void, several sword shadows appeared, violent and sharp. Bang! 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 Every time the sword shadow landed, there would be a patch of bloody light. Nie Tian's technique was swift and fierce as he killed a Rong family martial artist with a single slash. Most of the Rong family martial artists were still in shock over Rong Chiwei's death, and did not even have the chance to fight back before they were killed by Nie Tian. Nie Tian killed Rong Chiwei first because he wanted to achieve such an effect. In fact, if the dozen Rong family martial artists joined forces, they would be a great threat to him. After all, they were all high-level demi-saint powerhouses, and there were even a few rank 9 demi-saints among them. Run! In the blink of an eye, only 2 rank 9 demi-saints were left out of the dozen Rong family martial artists. They were completely scared out of their wits, and when they came to their senses, they moved and fled. "You think you can escape?" Nie Tianling smiled coldly. His figure swept through the air, and 2 sword shadows whizzed up, leaving 2 streaks of blood wherever they passed. 2 rank 9 demi-saint martial artists died tragically. In fact, it would not have been easy for Nie Tian to kill either of them if they were to fight head-on. They might even have had the chance to kill Nie Tian if they had joined forces. Unfortunately, they were scared out of their wits and only cared about running away. The moment they fled, they were destined to die a horrible death. In a battle between martial artists, besides strength, combat talent, and combat experience, momentum was also very important. How could they have a chance to win if they were afraid from the start? Nie Tian killed more than 10 Rong clan cultivators. Then, he shifted his gaze and looked at the battle in another part of the sky. At this time, Yu Tonghai and the scar-faced man were fighting fiercely. Saber light flickered high up in the sky. A violent saber intent rushed into the void and roared. Boom! Right at this moment, the two blade shadows clashed head-on. The space trembled violently as a terrifying force spread out in all directions. The saber intent surged wildly, instantly submerging the figures of Yu Tonghai and the scarred martial artist. When Nye Tian saw this scene, his heart couldn't help but sink, and he faintly had a bad premonition. That scarred martial artist was no ordinary individual. Although his ability was just a little higher than Yu Tonghai's, it was the difference between a demi-saint and a pseudo-saint. TQR1 in a head-on clash, Yu Tonghai's chances of winning were not high. With that thought in mind, Nye Tian's figure moved, charging towards the violent waves of saber intent high up in the sky. Die! That was when a low and sinister voice rang out. Then, a violent blade shadow appeared in the turbid void, cutting through the turbid waves and blasting towards a figure. Boom! Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly at the sight, and he slashed out with the starry heavenly slash in his hand, the sword shadow howling as it blasted towards the void. Boom! In the very next moment, the blade shadow and the sword shadow collided. Space trembled, and the aura of the blade and sword instantly exploded, turning into rolling waves that rushed into the void. Then, Nye Tian's figure arrived beside a blood-colored figure. It's you. The blood-colored figure trembled slightly, and when he saw that it was Nye Tian, his eyes trembled uncontrollably. That blood-colored figure was Yu Tonghai. He had been gravely injured in the battle against the scarred martial artist. If it weren't for Nye Tian's sword, he would have been killed by the scarred martial artist. At that moment, the scarred martial artist looked at Nye Tian, and his expression couldn't help but change as he exclaimed in surprise, "Huh?" He had been so focused on the battle just now that he didn't know that Rong Chiwei and the others had already died. Your seventh young master is already dead. Why don't you get lost? Nye Tian suddenly turned around and said coldly to the scarred martial artist. The scarred martial artist was very strong. If he fought with him, Nye Tian might not be able to gain the upper hand. Boy, you killed the seventh young master of the Rong family. The Rong family will not let you off. The scarred martial artist's face was extremely gloomy, and he said cold words. Then, his figure moved and he directly left. He had consumed too much energy in the battle with Yu Tonghai, and he felt that Nye Tian's sword attack just now was not weaker than Yu Tonghai's. He didn't have full confidence, so he didn't want to get entangled with Nye Tian. Nye Tian looked at the scarred martial artist's figure, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He murmured, "I'll wait for the Rong family to find me. Are you all right?" Then, Nye Tian looked at Yu Tonghai and asked with a frown. "No, I'm fine." Yu Tonghai looked embarrassed. He was very hesitant, but in the end, he still said, "Thank you for just now." Of course, he knew that if it weren't for Nye Tian's sword, he would have died at the hands of the scarred martial artist. "I saved you not because you are from the Yu family. I just feel that you don't deserve to die, that's all," Nye Tian said coldly as he glanced at Yu Tonghai. Yu Tonghai's expression was ugly. He said, "What happened just now was my fault. Please forgive me. Let's go." Nye Tian didn't say anything else and was ready to leave immediately. Yu Tonghai looked at Nye Tian in utter shock. He never imagined that Nye Tian would be so frightening. He had a feeling that if he had fought Nye Tian just now, he would have been the one who would have lost. He was already a very frightening being among rank 9 demi-saints. But Nye Tian was only a rank 1 demi-saint, and yet his combat ability was stronger than his own. It was truly frightening. Then, Nye Tian accompanied Yu Tonghai and the others to the territory controlled by the Yu family. He only left after making sure that Yu Tonghai and the others were safe. As Nye Tian bid his farewells, Yu Tonghai walked up to him and said with a solemn tone, "Brother Nye, what happened just now was all my fault. If you need my help in the future, I'll go through water and tread on fire for you. I'll die 1,000 deaths for you. You're too kind, brother Yu." Nie Tian smiled faintly, his expression calm. Since Yu Tonghai was apologizing so sincerely, he would appear petty if he didn't accept it. With that, Nie Tian didn't stay any longer and immediately turned to leave. It's hard to imagine that there is such a freakish martial artist in this world. And here I was boasting about my talent, but compared to him, I'm nothing but trash. Yu Tonghai smiled bitterly as he looked at Nie Tian's back. Not only had Nie Tian's performance shocked him, but it had also smashed his arrogance to the point where it was almost completely covered in bruises. He had considered himself a martial arts genius before, but it was only in front of Nie Tian that he realized that his talent was not worth mentioning at all. More importantly, Nie Tian's calmness had affected him greatly. Chapter 2969. After bidding farewell to the Yu siblings, Nie Tian prepared to leave the Arctic Snow Mountain. He had already been at the Arctic Snow Mountain for a few days. In a while, the Arctic Snow Mountain would open, and his strength had increased too much. He needed some time to stabilize his realm. Feng Shutong was already in the 9 extremes. He should be extracting holy liquid from the holy whirlpool. Nie Tian, the cultivation environment here is much better than outside. Why don't you find a secluded place and cultivate for a few days? When your realm is completely stabilized, you can leave then. Fat Cat's voice sounded and said to Nie Tian, "All right." Nie Tian's gaze focused and he agreed with Fat Cat's suggestion. There were still 10 days before the Arctic Snow Mountain opened. He only needed to leave before the mountain opened. After that, Nie Tian found a remote mountain valley and carefully examined the surroundings. After confirming that there were no abnormalities in the surroundings, he sat down cross-legged and started to practice cultivation. In the blink of an eye, 10 days passed. Nie Tian walked out of the mountain valley. At this moment, his aura was much stronger than before. He was abnormally sharp, like an unsheathed sword. The Arctic Snow Mountain is about to open. I must leave as soon as possible. Nie Tian murmured and walked down the mountain. Soon, he reached the outskirts of the Arctic Snow Mountain and was about to leave. At this time, dozens of figures appeared in the distance. It's people from Saint Soul Academy. Nie Tian saw from afar that 3 of the faces were very familiar. They were the teachers of Saint Soul Academy, by Ruozhu, Liang Zhen, and Yu Lian. These 3 teachers had forced Jun Aoqing to be her disciple when Nie Tian first entered Saint Soul Academy. So Nie Tian remembered them. And Bai Ruozhu, whom Nie Tian had interacted with a few times, had a deeper impression of her. Clearly, Bai Ruozhu and the others had received orders from the academy to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain to scout Nie Tian. At this time, Bai Ruozhu also discovered Nie Tian and shouted in pleasant surprise. She had a lot of interactions with Nie Tian, and Nie Tian always left a very deep impression on her, so she had a very good impression of Nie Tian. However, Liang Zhen and Yu Lian, who were beside her, had gloomy expressions and unfriendly gazes. "Teacher Bai, you've also come to the Arctic Snow Mountain." Nie Tian quickly walked over and smiled faintly at Bai Ruozhu. As for Liang Zhen and Yu Lian, he directly chose to ignore them. "Nie Tian, you." Bai Ruozhu observed Nie Tian from a close distance, and suddenly discovered something. Her delicate face suddenly stiffened and she was stunned. Her mouth opened wide, but no sound came out. How is this possible? Beside her, Liang Zhen and Yu Lian's expressions changed at the same time as they cried out with trembling eyes. The 3 of them had simultaneously sensed Nie Tian's ability. A level 1 demi-saint. Such ability was originally very common, and any random disciple of the Holy Soul Academy would have the ability of a demi-saint. But for a level 1 demi-saint to appear on Nie Tian's body was very frightening. Bai Ruozhu clearly remembered that when Nie Tian went to the Dark Moon Empire as a personal escort, he was only at the pinnacle of divine tier. How much time had passed, and yet Nie Tian's ability had actually become a level 1 demi-saint. It was truly unbelievable. Liang Zhen and Yu Lian were equally shocked in their hearts. When they had first met Nie Tian, the latter was truly weak. And now, Nie Tian had actually become a level 1 demi-saint. It was truly frightening. "Teacher Bai, are you alright?" Seeing Bai Ruoju's horrified expression, Nie Tian had already guessed what the latter was thinking. However, he still faintly smiled and asked, "TQR 1-inch Nie Tian, how did you become so powerful?" Bai Ruoju asked in surprise as she came to her senses. Halfway through her sentence, she could not help but gulp. "I was quite lucky. I absorbed some energy, which is why my ability improved a little faster." Nie Tian smiled faintly and answered half-truthfully. He had indeed relied on absorbing the energy of the blood yuan of the Saint Spirit to improve his ability so quickly. Still, Bai Ruoju would never have guessed that Nie Tian had obtained the blood yuan of the Saint Spirit during his training in the Holy Soul Valley. "That's—" Liang Zhen and Yu Lian inhaled sharply at the same time and looked at each other, their astonishment written all over their faces. Nie Tian's improvement in ability was simply too shocking and incomprehensible. Even Nie Fenghua, who was known as the #1 genius of the Holy Soul Academy all those years ago, was a far cry from Nie Tian. It must be said that this pair of father and son were each more monstrous than the other. Liang Zhen and Yu Lian even felt that Nie Tian had some dog-shit luck and merged with the inheritance of a saint. "Nie Tian, you entered the Arctic snow mountain alone?" At this time, Bai Ruoju suddenly thought of something and looked at Nie Tian with a shocked expression. "Yes." Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said indifferently, "I was helping teacher Hua Eru find something." Bai Ruoju's face froze again when she saw Nie Tian being so calm. It seemed that Nie Tian did not know how dangerous the Arctic snow mountain was. The factions that had entered the Arctic snow mountain ahead of time were not just the Holy Soul Academy, there were other factions. If they encountered other factions, it would be a battle of life and death. She really did not know how Nie Tian had survived in the Arctic snow mountain. "Nie Tian, did you get permission from the Academy to enter the Arctic snow mountain?" At this time, Liang Zhen's expression suddenly darkened as he asked coldly, "What does it have to do with you whether I got permission from the Academy or not?" Nie Tian glanced at Liang Zhen and replied with a cold expression, "You." Liang Zhen's eyes darkened as he suddenly felt a tightness in his chest, as if someone was pressing down on him with a boulder weighing tens of thousands of kilograms. He did not think that Nie Tian would be so arrogant and dare to speak to him like this. He was a teacher of the Academy after all. Wasn't this a slap to his face in front of so many people? Liang Zhen. Yu Lian was afraid that Liang Zhen would explode and secretly pulled him back. "Nie Tian, how dare you speak to teacher Liang like this? You have no respect for your elders." At that moment, a man stepped out from behind Liang Zhen and shouted at Nie Tian with a cold look in his eyes. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the other party. It was a rank 5 demi-saint martialist, probably an inner yard disciple. "What does what I say have to do with you?" Then, Nie Tianling laughed and said, "You jumped out in such a hurry, are you trying to please someone?" "Insolence." The person's face reddened as he growled, "You are just an outer yard disciple. How dare you disrespect a teacher? You are challenging the rules of the Holy Soul Academy." "Teacher?" Nie Tian laughed, then glanced at Liang Zhen and said coldly, "He is your teacher, not mine. When he attacked me, did he ever think of himself as a teacher? He doesn't even think of himself as a teacher, so why should I treat him as one?" When Liang Zhen heard Nie Tian's words, he could not help but blush, and his expression was uglier than if he had eaten shit. Nie Tian's insolence was beyond his expectations. If he had known earlier, he would never have spoken to Nie Tian. Chapter 2970. The moment the disciple said that, everyone turned silent. Liang Zhen's expression couldn't help but darken as he looked at the disciple in front of him. He didn't say anything for a long time. It was truly unsuitable for him to make this disciple fight in this sort of situation. Although Nye Tian was a bit cocky, he didn't do anything wrong. What's more, this disciple was an inner courtyard disciple. Attacking an outer courtyard disciple was against Saint Soul Academy's rules. At that moment, the expressions of the several tens of disciples on the side changed. The disciple who stood out was called Yi Zichen. He had always wanted to become Liang Zhen's disciple, but was rejected by Liang Zhen. The reason why he was so proactive was too obvious. Student back down. At that moment, Bai Ruozhu spoke up. She frowned. No matter if Nye Tian is right or wrong, it definitely isn't your turn to make a move. Nye Tian looked at Yi Zichen without saying anything. His gaze was cold and filled with disdain. The reason he didn't want to make a move wasn't because he was afraid of Yi Zichen, he just felt like he shouldn't waste time on an idiot. Traitor's son, coward. Yi Zichen looked at Nye Tian, then suddenly transmitted his voice to the latter and cursed. Nye Tian's expression instantly changed. His pupils constricted, and a murderous look appeared in his eyes. He didn't want to make a move, but Yi Zichen actually forced him to. He could endure it if Yi Zichen only cursed him, but he couldn't endure Yi Zichen calling his father a traitor. Fine! Nye Tian roared, then pointed at Yi Zichen. Since you want to die, then I'll grant your wish. Everyone's expression couldn't help but change when they heard Nye Tian's words, while their gazes turned weird. Nye Tian didn't say anything just now. Why did he suddenly get angry? Nye Tian, you don't have to. Bai Ruozhu was stunned for a moment, then looked towards Nye Tian. She wanted to say something, but was interrupted by the latter. Teacher Bai, can I kill him? Nye Tian waved his hand and asked Bai Ruozhu directly. About this. Bai Ruozhu's expression stiffened. She didn't know why Nye Tian's gaze suddenly became so fierce. What? You traitor's son, do you still want to fight to the death with me? Yi Zichen smiled coldly with a provocative look. His attitude was so arrogant that it seemed as if he was born in his mother's womb. So what if it's a fight to the death? Nye Tianling sneered and growled in response. Both Bai Ruozhu and Liang Zhen's expressions darkened. They didn't want to see Nye Tian and Yi Zichen fight to the death. Nye Tian, Yi Zichen, if you really want to fight, then spar casually. You definitely can't kill each other. At that moment, Yu Lian, who had been silent all along, spoke up with a sullen expression. His eyes flickered, and there was a sinister smile in his eyes. He was eager to see how powerful Nye Tian's current battle prowess was. Bai Ruozhu and Liang Zhen's expressions changed, but they finally nodded. With the current situation, it was already very difficult to stop this battle. It would be fine as long as no lives were lost. They're really going to fight. Everyone backed up one after another. Many people's eyes began to burn with passion, paying close attention to this battle. Although Nye Tian was only an outer courtyard disciple, his name had already spread throughout the entire Holy Soul Academy. Most people wanted to see with their own eyes just how strong the son of Holy Soul Academy's greatest traitor was. Nye Tian, you asked for it. Yi Zichen smiled coldly, while a cold light flashed in his eyes. At that moment, he did not treat Nye Tian as an opponent. Instead, he treated Nye Tian as a pebble for him to climb up. As long as he injured Nye Tian and helped Liang Zhen get back at him, then Liang Zhen would definitely take him in as his personal disciple. I won't kill you, but I'll let you know what it means to live a life worse than death. Nye Tian twitched his mouth and spoke coldly. His gaze was as cold as ice, while a bone-chilling gloominess seeped out. Yi Zichen couldn't help but feel shocked when he saw Nye Tian's gaze, while fear surfaced in his eyes. When he was stared at by Nye Tian, he actually felt like he was a little lamb, while Nye Tian was a wolf. When the others looked at Nye Tian, they couldn't help but tremble when they noticed Nye Tian's gaze. TQR1 they had rarely seen such a fierce gaze. It was as terrifying as that of a ferocious beast. Damn brat, you're too cocky. At that moment, Yi Zichen calmed down, let out a low roar, and flashed forward, punching out. A ball of flames appeared in the air, which instantly exploded and transformed into a terrifying, blazing fist that shot towards Nye Tian. Oh no! Bai Ruoju's eyes couldn't help but flicker when she saw that. Yi Zichen was a demi-saint expert, while Nye Tian was only a demi-saint. Yi Zichen used his full strength, so Nye Tian should be able to block it. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched coldly as he sensed the aura of the flames in the air. He said coldly, "Your first punch will be your last." With that, Yi Zichen's body trembled, and a berserk sword aura soared into the sky, while a terrifying sword intent surged through the air. This! Everyone's eyes trembled at this moment. They were completely shocked. None of them expected Nye Tian to be able to instantly unleash such a terrifying sword aura. However, the truly shocking scene had yet to come. Rumble! In the next moment, the fiery fist descended, but was blocked by Nye Tian's sword momentum. Then, the starlight heavenly slash appeared in Nye Tian's hand, which he stabbed out casually. It was a very normal movement, but it contained a terrifying aura. A beam of sword light whistled through the air, its aura sharp to the extreme. Before Yi Zichen could even react, it pierced right through his shoulder. Yi Zichen suddenly realized something was wrong. His face instantly turned as white as a sheet of paper. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, his body swayed. Instantly, streaks of blood shot out from his body, instantly turning him into a man of blood. The shocking scene caused everyone to fall into a deathly silence. Everyone looked at Yi Zichen, who was covered in blood, and their shock was perfectly displayed on their faces. Nye Tian's sword intent is so strong. His control over it is simply superb. Bai Ruoju was the first to react, and exclaimed with a dazed look in her eyes. Nye Tian's sword had pierced through Yi Zichen's body, and the sword intent had seeped into his body, directly shattering all of his meridians, including his 9 energy meridians. Although Yi Zichen was still alive, he was now a piece of trash that was worse than even a normal person. A normal person's meridians were at least intact, but all of Yi Zichen's meridians were shattered. Before Nye Tian attacked, he said that he wouldn't kill Yi Zichen, but he would let Yi Zichen know what it meant to be worse than death. Turning Yi Zichen into a cripple with a single strike was indeed worse than death for a martial artist. This time, Nye Tian was truly enraged. Yi Zichen shouldn't have called Nye Fenghua a traitor. Nye Tian, you're too vicious. At that moment, Liang Zhen finally reacted. His eyes blazed with rage as he roared, "No matter what, Yi Zichen is still your fellow disciple. How could you be so vicious?" Nye Tian looked at Liang Zhen and laughed coldly. "If he was stronger than me, then I'm afraid I would have ended up the same way. What's more, he asked for it." Asked for it? Just as he said that, a person stood out from behind Liang Zhen. A pair of cold eyes shone with a cold light as he stared at Nye Tian and said coldly, "I also want to ask for it. I wonder if Nye Tian can help me?" Nye Tian's heart couldn't help but tremble when he saw that person. He felt an extremely terrifying killing intent from that person. However, that person hid this killing intent very well. There was practically no trace of it. Chapter 2971. When Nye Tian looked at the warrior behind Liang Zhen, he felt an extremely terrifying killing intent. The killing intent was not overbearing. Instead, it was extremely restrained. However, it contained a heart-chilling coldness. The chilling killing intent contained a bone-chilling coldness. It was terrifyingly sharp. However, what terrified Nye Tian the most was not the killing intent, but the warrior who released it. The fact that the person was able to conceal his killing intent so perfectly already proved his identity. He was an assassin. Only an assassin, and a top-notch one at that, could conceal his killing intent to such a degree. What's more, this person directly stood out and provoked Nye Tian. It was clear that he came for Nye Tian. Luo Qi. At that moment, Bai Ruoju's expression darkened when she saw the warrior. "What do you want to do?" At this moment, the others also looked at this warrior and couldn't help but discuss. It's actually Luo Qi. Is he going to make a move? Luo Qi is one of the top 10 experts of the inner court. If he makes a move, then there's no way Nie Tian can match him. So strange, Luo Qi usually keeps a very low profile. Why did he suddenly stand out today? It must be because Nie Tian attacked too viciously, so Luo Qi doesn't like it. So the warrior was called Luo Qi. He was one of the top 10 experts in the inner court, and was extremely strong. However, Luo Qi usually kept a low profile, and never fought with others. Everyone couldn't help but find it strange that he suddenly stood out today. Everyone felt that it must be because Nie Tian attacked Yi Zichen too viciously, and angered a taciturn person like Luo Qi. Teacher, this person attacked so viciously. I can't stand it when he did this to a fellow disciple. Luo Qi's gaze darkened as he looked towards Bai Ruozhu with a righteous attitude. Aside from being one of the top 10 experts of the inner court, he was also Bai Ruozhu's personal disciple. What's more, Bai Ruozhu favored him greatly. Bai Ruozhu frowned. She seemed to have noticed something, causing her expression to stiffen. She felt a very strange aura from Luo Qi's body, but when she wanted to carefully sense this aura, it strangely disappeared. Furthermore, she felt that this direct disciple of hers was acting a little strange today, but she couldn't pinpoint what exactly was strange about him. Based on her understanding of Roche, it was impossible for the latter to step forward at this time. What was wrong with Roche today? Teacher, please allow me to teach this person a lesson. Then, Roche bowed slightly. Although his expression was respectful, his eyes were shining with a strange light. QL 11-inch Luo Qi, stand down. Bai Ruozhu's eyebrows furrowed. She couldn't help but feel a bit angry. Teacher, please allow me to make a move. Luo Qi's face darkened slightly, but he did not retreat. Instead, he spoke again. Bai Ruozhu's charming face stiffened, and the doubts in her heart grew heavier. Luo Qi was usually very respectful to her, but today he actually dared to disobey her. Was this person in front of her really the disciple she favored the most? Nie Tian, this kid with the surname Luo is a little strange. You should exchange a few blows with him. I need to properly sense his aura. At this moment, the fat cat's voice suddenly rang out and said to Nie Tian, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he nodded in agreement. He also felt an unusual aura from Luo Qi's body. That aura actually made his god-fiend nascent embryo a little restless. At this moment, Liang Zhen, Yu Lian, and the other disciples all locked their gazes on the master-disciple pair, Bai Ruozhu and Luo Qi. Luo Qi directly collided with Bai Ruozhu. This was something that no one had expected. Luo Qi, I'll say it one more time. Stand down. Bai Ruozhu was really a little angry as she spoke in a cold voice. However, Luo Qi did not move. Evidently, he had no intention of backing down. Bai Ruozhu's expression turned ugly. She never dreamed that Luo Qi, the most obedient and most gentle disciple, would dare to disobey her in front of so many people. Teacher Bai. However, at this moment Nie Tian suddenly spoke. He faintly smiled and said, Since senior brother Luo wants to teach me a lesson, how can I disappoint him? If I continue to cower from a fight, wouldn't people think that I'm a coward? Nie Tian, do you really dare to fight me? Luo Qi suddenly raised his head when he heard Nie Tian's words. His eyes revealed a strange light that flashed for a moment. However, Bai Ruozhu still noticed it in that instant. How is this possible? Why is there a hint of hostility in Luo Qi's eyes? Bai Ruozhu exclaimed in her heart. She almost suspected that she had seen wrongly. However, the scene just now had a huge impact on her. It was impossible for her to have seen wrongly. If senior brother Luo wants to fight, then I'll naturally accompany you. Nie Tian also noticed the abnormality in Luo Qi's body and said with a faint smile. When everyone saw this scene, their eyes couldn't help but burn with passion. They were ready to watch a good show. Nye Tian really has gut. He actually dared to fight Luo Qi. Perhaps Nye Tian really does have the strength to fight. Didn't you see how he crippled Yi Zichen's sword? It was a complete suppression. Impossible. Luo Qi is an expert in the top 10 of the inner courtyard. He has already reached the 9th level of the demi-saint level. He will probably break through to the false saint level soon. No matter how heaven-defying Nye Tian is, he is only a first-level demi-saint. How could he be Luo Qi's match? As everyone spoke, their gazes towards Nye Tian turned cold and playful. They really wanted to see the scene of Nye Tian being defeated. That scene would definitely be very satisfying. Very good, Luo Qi smiled cold. Luo Qi laughed coldly, then said loudly, I will only make one move. After that, regardless of whether you live or die, Yi Zichen's matter will end here. Sure. Nye Tian smiled faintly and agreed without hesitation. Bai Ruozhu was stunned for a long time before she reacted. However, it was already too late for her to interfere. With that, both Nye Tian and Luo Qi soared into the sky at the same time and faced off against each other. I hope nothing happens. Bai Ruozhu looked up at the two figures. She knew that there was no turning back, so she could only hope that nothing happened. On the other hand, Liang Zhen and Yu Lian's eyes burned with passion. They did not know what was going on with Luo Qi today, but they really wanted to see the scene of Nye Tian's crushing defeat. High up in the sky, Nye Tian's entire body was covered in surging sword intent. His sword momentum was accumulating, making him look like a sharp sword. On the other hand, Luo Qi's expression was dark. He had a strange smile on his face, while an evil aura surged in his eyes. At that moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded out, Nye Tian, go all out. Don't hold back. This sovereign wants you to force him to use his true strength. Nye Tian frowned, then nodded. He was very curious about what exactly Fat Cat found on Luo Qi. Boom! With that, Nye Tian's body trembled. A powerful sword aura soared into the sky, as if it was going to tear the heavens and earth apart. Luo Qi's gaze couldn't help but focus when he sensed Nye Tian's aura. He did not expect Nye Tian to be so strong. However, his expression changed in the next moment, and a chilling, killing intent surged in his eyes. At this moment, a layer of strange, evil aura appeared around his body. It was like a black rune that circulated around his body. Chapter 2972. Soul Eater. Nye Tian's expression changed when he heard Fat Cat's voice. The Soul Eater must be extraordinary to be able to make Fat Cat panic. Die. At that moment, Luo Qi's eyes flashed with coldness. He roared and slammed his hand out, causing the void to sink. Boom. In the next moment, a cluster of flames appeared in the sky and exploded into a huge flaming hand, which was wreathed in raging flames, as if it were going to burn heaven and earth into nothingness. Crushing the void, it charged madly towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes darkened when he saw the giant flaming hand. He saw that there was a layer of strange black runes flowing outside the flames of the giant flaming hand. Upon closer inspection, the black runes were actually tiny black skulls that exuded an extremely evil aura. Proud sword technique, forbidden third style, sky-devouring blood. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and the sword intent around him surged to its peak. His blood aura burst forth and merged with his sword intent, stimulating the might of the god-devil sword intent to its limit. Boom! The next moment, he stabbed out with his sword. The sword will condensed in the air, and the space sank when the shadow of the sword appeared. How terrifying! At that moment, everyone's expression changed. The shock in their hearts had reached an extreme level. It was hard to imagine that Nye Tian, who was only a first-stage demi-saint, could explode with such terrifying power in an instant. Nye Tian was too terrifying. The expressions of Bai Ruozhu, Liang Zhen, and Yu Lian froze as well. They were all third-stage pseudo-saints, but when they felt the aura of the blood-red sword shadow in the void, they felt a hint of pressure and threat. How could Nye Tian's sword will be so terrifying? Bai Ruoju's heart trembled. She was worried that Nye Tian would be injured by Luo Qi. But at that moment, she knew that her worry was unnecessary. The one she should be worried about was Luo Qi. Huh! Luo Qi felt the surging sword pressure in the sky and could not help but narrow his eyes. At this moment, he had to admit that he had greatly underestimated Nye Tian's strength. Boom! In the next moment, the blood-colored sword shadow collided with the giant flaming hand. The space suddenly trembled, and the space within tens of thousands of meters was filled with surging sword intent and violent flames. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying waves continued to attack, and Nye Tian and Luo Qi's figures were instantly submerged. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A series of ear-piercing rumbling sounds came from the sky. The eyes of the crowd trembled, not daring to be distracted at all. No one had expected Nye Tian and Luo Qi to fight to such an extent with just a single move. Rumble! Bang, bang, bang! At this moment, a thunderous sound rang out, followed by countless explosions in the air. The huge flaming hand was actually torn apart by the sword shadows. Then, the shadow of the sword roared like a dragon and rushed towards Luo Qi. Boom! Luo Qi's eyes narrowed, but he did not panic. Instead, his body jerked as numerous black symbols surged out from his body and formed a black flame armor around him. Bang! In the next moment, the sword shadows fell and bombarded the black flame armor. However, it suddenly paused and then collapsed. At the same time, the black flame armor on Luo Qi's body also disappeared. It was obvious that he did not want others to see his black flame armor. However, it was a pity that many people below had seen the black flame armor. QL11 Nye Tian and Luo Qi's figures retreated at the same time and then stabilized themselves at the same time. After a while, the violent waves in the void dispersed, and the two figures appeared in front of the crowd. That black flame armor is Luo Qi's true strength, isn't it? Nye Tian looked at Luo Qi with a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. He was very curious as to why Luo Qi possessed such strength. Although the black flame armor had only appeared for a moment, the evil aura was so strong that even Nye Tian could not help but be afraid. If Luo Qi had used the black flame armor's strength just now, the result of the collision would have been different. Fat Cat had noticed Luo Qi's strangeness, which was why she had asked Nye Tian to use his full strength to force Luo Qi to use his true strength. Luo Qi did not use the black flame armor's strength, because he did not want others to see it. However, if he had not used the black flame armor to defend himself, he would have been seriously injured even if he did not die. At that moment, Luo Qi stared coldly at Nye Tian. His eyes were cold and murderous, as if he wanted to swallow Nye Tian alive. Although he was not injured, he had been forced to use his true strength. He had underestimated Nye Tian. If he had known that Nye Tian's strength was so terrifying, he would have used his full strength to kill Nye Tian directly, even if it meant exposing his true strength. However, it was too late now, because the collision between him and Nye Tian had ended. You are indeed strong. Nye Tian looked at Luo Qi and smiled, his eyes filled with provocation. Nye Tian, I have underestimated you. Luo Qi's face was sinister as he said cold, You won't be so lucky the next time we fight. After saying that, he moved and landed on the ground. Nye Tian smiled faintly and landed on the ground as well. Everyone looked at Nye Tian and Luo Qi in shock, unable to calm down for a long time. Luo Qi, what kind of power did you use just now? At that moment, Bai Ruoju's face darkened as she looked at Luo Qi cold. Luo Qi was her personal disciple, but she had never known that the black flame armor in his body had such power. Even though she was separated from Luo Qi by tens of thousands of meters, she could feel the evil aura contained in the black flame armor. Could it be that she had never understood this disciple of hers, or that Luo Qi had been pretending in front of her? Teacher, this is my business. You don't have to worry too much about it, Luoqi said coldly as he looked at Bai Ruozhu. After saying that, he took a step back and walked into the crowd, not saying anything else. Bai Ruozhu's pretty face froze and became extremely ugly. At that moment, she felt that Luoqi was so unfamiliar. Was this still that humble and respectful disciple? Teacher Bai Luoqi only concealed his strength. You don't have to blame him. After all, every martial artist has their own secrets, Yulian said with a laugh as he took a step forward. Bai Ruozhu only reacted after a long time. If Luoqi really concealed his strength, then he hid it too deeply. Bai Ruozhu could not accept this statement. She felt that Luoqi's body was definitely hiding a huge secret. Let's go. Yulian smiled faintly, turned around and started to walk out of the Arctic snow mountain. A small storm ended just like that. But in Nie Tian's heart there was a huge question. Nie Tian, I'm afraid this Luoqi is no longer Luoqi. At this time, without waiting for him to ask, Fat Cat's voice already sounded. What do you mean? Nie Tian's brows furrowed. He did not understand Fat Cat's strange words. Chapter 2973. Soul Possession. Nie Tian's expression sank after hearing the Fat Cat's words. Soul possession was a very sinister method. To put it simply, it was to use a powerful soul to forcibly occupy another cultivator's body. In the past, Nie Tian's soul was almost possessed by Di Shi Tian and the Ghost Emperor. Now that the Fat Cat said that Luoqi's soul was possessed, how could Nie Tian not be shocked? Fat, are you sure? After a while, Nie Tian became cold and asked with a frown. Very sure. The Fat Cat replied in a deep voice, the moment you forced Luoqi to use his true strength, I could tell that Luoqi is a member of the Soul Eater tribe. Soul Eater tribe. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard this name again. Is this tribe very powerful? Yes. The Fat Cat nodded and said, the Soul Eater tribe is one of the 4 great tribes in the ancient times. Rumor has it that this tribe has been extinct for a long time. I didn't expect there to be someone still alive. The 4 great tribes in the ancient times. Nie Tian frowned slightly. This was not the first time he had heard this name. Moreover, he should have come into contact with the 4 great tribes in the ancient times. The Holy Soul Valley, the Cloud Buddhishur clan, the 7 Knights Wei clan, and the Soul Eater tribe were the 4 great tribes in the ancient times. The Soul Eater tribe was on par with the Holy Soul Valley and the Cloud Buddhishur clan. It was enough to prove that this tribe was very powerful. Nie Tian, do you know what the bloodline power of the Soul Eater tribe is? The Fat Cat's expression changed and suddenly asked. Nie Tian shook his head. This was the first time he had heard of the Soul Eater tribe. How could he know the bloodline power of this tribe? The bloodline power of the Soul Eater tribe is called the Soul Eater Curse. It is a kind of power that specializes in soul stealing. The Fat Cat's expression sank slightly as it said in a heavy tone. Soul Eater Curse. Nie Tian frowned. He did not expect that in this world, there was actually a bloodline power that specialized in seizing souls. This kind of bloodline power wasn't all that scary, but it was enough to make one shudder in fear. Imagine, a kind of bloodline power could easily take over a person's soul. This was even crueler than directly killing that person. The power of the soul-devouring ghost curse is extremely terrifying. The Fat Cat continued, soul-devouring is only one of the powers of the soul-devouring ghost curse. With the soul-devouring ghost curse, after the soul-devouring ghost tribe members possess someone else's soul, they can also fuse with the possessed person's bloodline power. With the stimulation of the soul-devouring ghost curse, they will be able to unleash even greater power. When Nie Tian heard what Fat Cat said, his expression changed and he was shocked. The soul-devouring ghost curse was too terrifying, wasn't it? Not only could it seize the divine soul, but it could even fuse with the bloodline power of the seized person. Just imagine, if a member of the soul-devouring ghost tribe possessed a few more times, Wouldn't they be able to obtain different kinds of bloodline power? The fusion of several bloodline powers, coupled with the stimulation of the soul-devouring ghost curse, would be able to unleash even greater power? That was too terrifying. Nie Tian, your attack just now forced Luo Qi to use the soul-devouring ghost curse. That black flame armor is the result of the fusion of the soul-devouring ghost curse and Luo Qi's original bloodline power, said the fat cat in a deep voice. Nie Tian took a deep breath. His heart was filled with astonishment. Nie Tian, I'm afraid this soul-devouring ghost tribe member is here for you, said the fat cat with a sigh. For me. Nie Tian was startled. His eyes glistened. He recalled the murderous look in Luo Qi's eyes when he came out to challenge him. Only the best assassins would have such a look. When the thought of assassins came to mind, Nie Tian immediately thought of an organization, the Dark Knight. An assassin like Luo Qi could only be nurtured by the Dark Knight. Nie Tian was already on the Dark Knight heavenly kill list. Thus, the Dark Knight must have figured out his background. With that in mind, it was not surprising that Luo Qi would appear here. The original Luo Qi must have suffered an undeserved calamity, and was possessed by the current Luo Qi. The Dark Knight assassin possessed Luo Qi with only one goal, to get close to Nie Tian and kill him. However, he did not expect Nie Tian's strength to greatly surpass his expectations. Nie Tian, be careful. This soul-devouring ghost tribe member is not easy to deal with, said the fat cat in a deep voice to warn Nie Tian. Nie Tian nodded. Then, he thought of something and asked, if I kill the current Luo Qi, does that mean this soul-devouring ghost tribe member will die too? Not necessarily. The fat cat shook his head and said, the soul-devouring ghost tribe is an extremely mysterious force. Due to the existence of the soul-devouring ghost curse, the soul-devouring ghost tribe members have abnormally strong souls. Even if their bodies are gone, their souls can still exist for a long time. Upon hearing Little Fat Cat's words, Nie Tian's face couldn't help but turn ugly. He did not expect the soul-devouring ghost tribe to be so strange. Nie Tian, you do not need to worry too much. This soul-devouring ghost tribe member has already attacked once. He should not be attacking again in the near future. The fat cat nodded slightly and said, moreover, your soul is not weak. This guy cannot possess you. As long as you are strong enough, you do not need to be afraid of him. Nie Tian nodded and couldn't help but take a look at Luo Qi. He did not plan on revealing Luo Qi's identity. Even if he did, the others would not believe him. He was the son of the greatest traitor of Holy Soul Academy. Most people in the academy were not friendly toward him. A moment later, Nie Tian and the others walked out of the Arctic snow mountain and quickly returned to the temporary city. After bidding farewell to Bai Ruozhu, Nie Tian left to find Huairu. Soon, he arrived at Huairu's place. Nie Tian. Huairu was pleasantly surprised to see Nie Tian. He had been very worried about Nie Tian after he entered the Arctic snow mountain for so long. Now that Nie Tian had returned, he was naturally happy. But in the next moment, when he sensed Nie Tian's strength, his old face instantly froze, and he could not speak for a long time. He could not believe his eyes. Nie Tian was already a rank 1 demi-saint. After all, it had only been 10 days since Nie Tian had ascended to the first step of the demi-saint realm from the third step of the half-saint realm. That was almost a major advancement in his cultivation base. How did Nie Tian do it? Elder Hua, I didn't let you down, did I? Nie Tian said with a faint smile, having already expected such a reaction from Hua Gong. No. Huairu only reacted after a dozen seconds. He shook his head repeatedly, his old face wrinkled like a blooming flower. Not only did Nie Tian not let him down, but he had also given him a pleasant surprise. A huge surprise. Let's go, Nie Tian. Prepare to enter the Arctic snow mountain. After a moment, Huairu calmed down and said to Nie Tian, Then, the two came to a square in the temporary city and met up with the others from Holy Soul Academy. There were hundreds of people standing in the square, all of whom were going to enter the Arctic snow mountain. Apart from some teachers, these hundreds of people were all genius martial artists of Holy Soul Academy. There were people from the outer court, the inner court, the core court, and even those on the hidden dragon list. No one knew what was inside the Arctic snow mountain, so it was necessary to bring along genius martial artists of all ages and levels. And on the high platform in the center of the square, a black-robed figure stood, his eyes cold and disdainful as he looked around. Chapter 2974. Nietion's eyes narrowed when he saw Kuyo Oneguchi, and the blood in his body almost boiled as he became restless. Kuyo Oneguchi had almost killed Nie Fenghua, and Nie Tian was naturally very excited to see him. Calm down, Nie Tian. Huairu, sensing Nie Tian's irritation, secretly transmitted his voice to him. Nie Tian's eyes focused for a moment, and he became much calmer. Of course, he knew that now was not the time to fall out with Kuyo Oneguchi. At the same time, on the high platform, Kuyo Oneguchi's eyes glazed over when he noticed Nie Tian. It was clear that he had sensed Nie Tian's strength and was deeply shocked. He had never imagined that Nie Tian's strength would reach level 1 demi-saint in such a short time. He clearly remembered that Nie Tian had only been in the sacred spirit domain for a few months, and that Nie Tian was only at the pinnacle of divinity state at that time. Nie Tian's strength had risen to level 1 demi-saint in just a few months. That was too terrifying. Master, how could this kid's strength be? Beside Kuyo Oneguchi, Bien Hongnong, the lord of the Starry Sky Pavilion, was so shocked that he could not speak. His impression of Nie Tian was, of course, deep. It was Nie Tian who triggered the sacred spirit steel, and even the martial fate matrix of the Starry Sky Pavilion was destroyed by Nie Tian. Bien Hongnong personally believed that Nie Tian had the legendary fate of gods and demons. Of course, he was aware of the power of the fate of gods and demons, but he had never imagined that Nie Tian's strength would improve at such a terrifying speed. The fate of gods and demons, could he really be an existence that transcends the realm of gods and demons? Bien Hongnong's face was full of shock as he thought to himself. Kuyo Oneguchi's expression softened, but the corners of his mouth revealed an unconcealable smile. He said in his heart, Nie Tian, the speed of your growth has exceeded my expectations. It seems like you're indeed much stronger than Nie Fenghua. From the looks of it, it won't be long before you'll be able to help me accomplish what your father couldn't. Thinking of this, Kuyo Oneguchi's eyes surged with a strange light. That was his life's goal. He believed that Nie Tian could do it. Next, Kuyo Oneguchi said a few things, and then the people of Saint Soul Academy began to enter the Arctic Snow Mountain. After everyone entered the Arctic Snow Mountain, they headed straight into the depths of the mountain. The various forces had agreed to meet in an ice valley in the hinterland of the snowy mountains. Nie Tian estimated that since the Holy World Seed was such a big event, all the peak experts of the Holy Soul Realm would be present. At that time, it would definitely be a fierce battle. After a few hours, everyone arrived outside a huge ice valley. And at this time, there was a hubbub in the ice valley. The warriors of the other forces had already gathered in the ice valley. The people of Saint Soul Academy, led by Kuyo Oneguchi, entered the ice valley. This ice valley was very vast, and the wind and snow inside were also a little lighter. And in the center of the ice valley, there was a large pavilion. Dozens of warriors sat in the pavilion, each with a powerful and terrifying aura. Kuyo Oneguchi, Tianyu, Huairu, and several other high-level figures of Saint Soul Academy walked directly towards the pavilion. Nie Tian couldn't help but look at the large pavilion, feeling the aura of the people in the pavilion. He was shocked. These people were the peak experts of the various forces of the Holy Soul Realm, and also the peak figures of the entire Holy Soul Realm. But Nie Tian saw that these people's seats had a clear hierarchy. and sitting on the main seat was a middle-aged warrior. His features were delicate and handsome, and his heroic spirit was imposing. His aura was restrained, and there was a smile on his face. TQR1 This middle-aged warrior's strength was not strong. He was only a 7th-order pseudo-martial sage, but the others were surrounding him. Obviously, his status was very high. Nye Tian was very curious who this middle-aged warrior was. Nye Tian. And at this time, a familiar voice suddenly sounded behind Nye Tian. He turned around and saw that it was Feng Qi. Behind Feng Qi stood Si Xiaoye. Nye Tian, I knew you would come. Feng Qi was very happy to see Nye Tian, and he smiled happily. But Si Xiaoye's gaze on Nye Tian froze, and then her face froze. Nye Tian looked at Si Xiaoye and Feng Qi, and his face also froze in shock. He suddenly realized that Si Xiaoye and Feng Qi's strength had actually reached the 9th order half-martial sage. And not long ago, Feng Qi and Si Xiaoye were low-level half-martial sages. Holy shit! Meanwhile, Feng Qi realized Nye Tian's strength and exclaimed, Are you a monster? Nye Tian collected his thoughts and said with a smile, The improvement of your strength is quite shocking. It seemed like Nye Tian was not the only one whose strength had skyrocketed during this period of time. I made a trip back to my clan a while ago, and under the arrangement of my clan, I had some fortuitous encounters. Feng Qi took a long time to calm down. He explained and said with a dejected face, I thought that my strength would be much higher than yours. I didn't expect you to be stronger than me. It turned out that his strength had improved due to the support of his clan. He thought his strength would surpass Nye Tian's by a lot, but when he saw Nye Tian again, he was completely dumbfounded. The same went for Si Xiaoye, who had returned with Feng Qi, which was why her strength had skyrocketed. Nye Tian nodded slightly with a faint smile. However, he was still shocked that the Feng clan was able to help Feng Qi and Si Xiaoye improve so quickly. It was obvious how powerful this clan was. With a faint smile, Nye Tian calmed down and asked, Feng Qi, those people in that pavilion are all important figures from the Saint Soul realm, right? Of course. Feng Qi nodded with a smile. Apart from the 9 mystical sect, Wuji dynasty, and Shenluo dynasty, the rest of the top 10 factions of the Sacred Soul region are here. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He already knew the top 10 factions of the Sacred Soul region. He also knew some of the people in the pavilion. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, Who's that man sitting in the seat of honor? Well, Feng Qi looked at the middle-aged cultivator and hesitated before saying, He's my 9th uncle, Qin Jingyue. Nye Tian's expression flickered with astonishment. He never would have thought that the middle-aged cultivator sitting in the main seat was Feng Qi's 9th uncle. This meant that the Myriad Domains Guild was also involved. Nye Tian had heard from Shichan that the first Sacred World Seed of the Sacred Soul region was in the hands of the Myriad Domains Guild. Could it be that the Myriad Domains Guild wanted to control a second Sacred World Seed? He was a little curious as to why Feng Qi's 9th uncle was called Qin Jingyue. His surname wasn't Feng, but Qin. However, he didn't ask too much. After all, this was the Feng clan's matter. Feng Qi looked at Nye Tian and said with a faint smile, Nye Tian, don't worry. Our Myriad Domains Guild won't get our hands on the Sacred World Seed this time. We're just here to give the other factions of the Sacred Soul region a fair ruling, lest they start a war. Nye Tian nodded and felt a little more at ease. It was best if the Myriad Domains Guild didn't interfere. If they did, Nye Tian had to obtain the Sacred World Seed. The Sacred World Seed was too important to him. He had to get it. Kid, you're here. At this time, a low growl suddenly sounded.